Hello and welcome, my gentle and, of course, very modern apes. My name is Erika, your gentle and very modern host, and I am here with John, aka Godless Engineer. Welcome to SkepTalk. I'm really excited for the show that we're getting ready to have today. We already have callers lined up and ready to go, but before, I need to tell you a few things. First of all, it is currently June 10th, 2024. This is SkepTalk. Second of all, if you want a super chat, at the end, we have to read those, regardless of how goofy they are. So send a super chat, whether you are a theist or an atheist, whether you have a fun question or a thought-provoking one, send them in if you don't feel like calling, and we will be going over all of them at the very end, at the tail end of the show. And lastly, my question is for you, John. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I've been really working hard on editing an audiobook that's going to be hopefully coming out soon. So it's not my book. It was actually my wife, KC. She voiced an audiobook, and so I'm just doing the editing on it. So hopefully I can get that out here soon.
Cool. Love to hear it. Editing is a rewarding process, but at the same time, I feel like a lot of folks out there don't know how time consuming it is. Editing is an art and a science simultaneously, so I can only imagine how much work you're putting in.
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, like, I pretty much have to edit, like, every sentence. I got to make sure it's spaced correctly and all that kind of stuff. Make sure everything can be heard clearly. There's no, like, bumps or dings or anything like that. So it's definitely a whole process, and it's been a long process.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can imagine. Well, I just got back into the country. I was in the Caribbean with some of my in-laws lately, and two fun things happened while I was there. To catch, those of you out there who, might not know, up on the scene, I'm a menace on Twitter. And so recently I fired off a tweet because Ken DeSoen said something dumb, and I fired it off like right before I left and had very limited Wi-Fi for the entire trip. And it was like a hit tweet. I accidentally ratioed Candace Owens over my vacation, which was just a cherry on top on what was otherwise a lovely trip. Second only to seeing an octopus, which I've never seen in the wild, which was a very, very large treat, to say the least. So that's what I was up to for the past week. That and just about nothing else. So vacation is for vacationing.
Yeah, so at the beginning of May, I actually went to Hawaii, and one of the things that we got to do was snorkel, and so that was really fun to snorkel out there. I got to put my swimming skills to the test, there was a bunch of guides that were with us, and so like they would swim all the way down to the bottom, and one of them actually pulled up a small squid, I believe it was. It was a cephalopod of some kind. I'm not a zoologist. But it was pretty cool. We were able to buy like fish food, like it was like eco-friendly, like fish food that you can feed the fish there. And so like we got to feed the fish, and the fish like crowded us and everything like that. It was really cool.
Dude, snorkeling is so cool. And, for me, this is the first snorkeling trip in a very, very long time. Like when we did snorkeling on the trip, that it was like a very fun experience for me because I wear glasses and I do not have prescription goggles. So what my husband did this time, normally when I'm snorkeling, I'm like, oh yeah, there's a blob over there. It looks very iridescent. It's probably a gorgeous fish, but I can't see what it looks like because it's more than 10 feet away. So I have no idea what I'm looking at. He'll be like, oh, look at that. It's a reef shark. I'm like, it's a dark blob to me. So this time my solution was I got one of those like total face covering masks. And then I brought like a jeweler's kit and would unscrew the screws on my glasses and then tape them on the inside of the goggles so that I could see with like 20/20 vision while I was snorkeling. And it was like, I understand why people enjoy snorkeling again. Like I haven't been able to see underwater clearly since I was like 15. So to me, it was like a mind-blowing experience. I could have sat there all day long with my head under the water and see rays and sharks and fish and single octopus. It was totally an epic experience.
So in Hawaii, totally cool experience. So we stayed at this little condo type place, and they had like those lagoons or whatever. And yeah, and the one that was right in front of our building, it actually had a sea turtle in it, and like we just stumbled upon it. And we had like our snorkeling gear and everything like that. So we were just swimming around looking at stuff, and then all of a sudden it's like sea turtle, and we're like, what? So we got to like see it in the rocks and eating and stuff.
They're so cool too, like how when they swim along, they stick their little head up like a periscope and like look around. They are really, really phenomenal. I'm on my bucket list, and it's not a good idea to have like seeing cool rare animals. Hell yeah, that's awesome. That's phenomenal.
I had we both had a local tattoo artist actually do this sort of in the shop. And they were experts, or well, I guess local experts or whatever, in like sort of Polynesian, I guess, sort of design, or whatever area. And so we just had them sort of freehand it.
Oh, that's so sick. I love it. My dream would be to see a loggerhead turtle, because they're enormous. They're the biggest type of extant sea turtle. Seeing one would be incredible, but it's folly to put that on your list, because the second you put an animal on your list, you'll never see it.
So I guess maybe not many people know this, but when I was growing up, like in high school and just shortly after high school, I was a lifeguard at a local water park. The water park is right on the edge, or like right on a river. And so like we had this wave pool, and there would be snapping turtles that get in there all the time. Well, guess who lucks up and has to remove the sea turtles? Or not sea turtles, sorry, the snapping turtles. The lifeguards. We have to go in and clean every morning. So every morning we find snapping turtles, and we're the ones that gotta like reach in and like pull out snapping turtles from the pool. And it's just it's not a fun experience.
There are a couple of critters out there that I would define as mean. Like they just strike me as quite mean, and like snapping turtles are definitely one of them. They you swim around and they see your toes and they're like, bait, what a delicious snack. And speaking of bait, speaking of conversation, I'm trying to segue into these calls. Speaking of bait, let's talk to some theists who are not hopefully presenting us with bait, but are here for a fun conversation. How's that?
I'm totally down for that.
A 10 out of 10 host for you here. Let's see what we got. Holy mackerel. Okay, we got a lot of colors on the line. Now, for our lovely atheist callers, thank you so much for calling in. Typically what the protocol is here on the line, here on SkepTalk, is we take theist callers first. Theist callers get priority because this is SkepTalk and we want to talk to people who are skeptical. So please stay with us. We are going to try to get to everybody at the end, especially we tend to really rapid fire through the atheist callers. But we're actually going to start with our first caller of the day being Anthony, pronouns he, him, from Virginia. He's a theist. And he wants to ask us if we see free will as more likely than determinism. So let's let Anthony on the line on SkepTalk. Anthony, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Tell us a little, welcome to SkepTalk, and tell us a little bit about your question.
Yeah, Erika, on May 13th, you were on SkepTalk, and an atheist caller or someone was speaking to you and was trying to present an argument for determinism and how it's basically more scientifically valid than the idea of free will. And you were pretty much agreeing with a lot of what that person was saying. So I kind of wanted to play off of that conversation and explore that concept, because it seems to me like any argument against free will is self-defeating and scientifically just wrong. So, and John, obviously, whatever thoughts you have as well, but that's kind of what I wanted to explore. Like,
yeah,
why does no free will, why does determinism seem more likely and scientific to you?
That's an awesome question. So most of what I know about this conversation comes from, and I believe I mentioned this on that call as well, comes from the work of Robert Sapolsky, who's done quite a bit of neurology, and then he's also a primatologist. So that's how I got my introduction to him. I've read his text Behave, which is quite good and includes a little bit about the determinism, free will conversation. But at the same time, he has this other book called Determined that specifically tackles that issue, and I've not read it yet. It's not even on my shelf. Because to me, the conversation, while interesting, kind of falls to the wayside in comparison to other conversations that I tend to prefer having. My opinion on it, as a result, is not as informed as I would like it to be, but I can tell you where I come from now, like my perspective as of right now. To me, free will is something that doesn't seem to be tangible or empirical. It's not something that we seem to be able to measure. And all the neurology that comes out of this topic seems to suggest that we are, not to sound too gray on it, but more or less extremely complicated response stimulus machines. Does that mean that free will is like definitely not a thing? No, I wouldn't put myself in that category. I would say I don't think it's likely, because my understanding is that from a lot of the neurology, when we are presented with various stimuli and various questions, choices in our lives, we tend to make decisions that are fully informed by every prior experience combined with our predispositions in our genetics and our anatomy and things of that nature. I see no reason to suppose, given that, and I believe there's been some studies as well that show that when we make decisions, the brain sort of fires in our motor regions before it sort of clicks in our frontal lobes, for lack of a better term. I'm no neurologist, but the idea is that when I choose to pick up my White Claw, my brain fires the motor neurons to pick up the White Claw before it occurs to me that I'm about to pick up the White Claw. So to me, that suggests that if there is a type of free will going on, it's something that is so utterly intangible that my conscious self can't recognize it. And it's something that doesn't appear to be at present measurable. And so I am inclined to doubt that it exists.
Okay. John, do you have any thoughts?
I have a lot of thoughts going on. So I guess I try to think of things in, I guess, simplistic terms, especially when it comes to areas outside of my expertise. And the way that I've always seen like free will versus determinism is like with free will, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that you're talking about like absolute free will, right? Like for every decision that I make, I have the ability to choose any any decision that could conceivably exist. I have that at my fingertips to choose, correct?
Yeah, I guess the way the philosophers kind of put it is you can choose otherwise, or in my perspective, the future is indeterminate. So whenever you arrive at a point in time or a moment, yeah, your course is not set, so right. You can go one way or the other. Okay, yeah.
Right. I was just trying to make sure that I was talking about how you felt about free will, and it seems like I was at least correctly describing what you think. And I really can't square that with my own experience. Now, could there be somebody out there that like has the ability to foresee every single choice that exists for any particular decision? I'm not going to rule that out necessarily, but I feel like for any one person making a decision, you have a curated list of decisions to make, and then you have the ability to decide between those two, or not two, but those however many present to you. But the curated list that your mind, I guess, presents to you as options for what you can do, that's just a incredibly small amount of decisions that could be made. And I'll give you an example. If and I actually had a Mormon one time. I said this yesterday on the show. I had 2 Mormons come to my house at one point, and they came back 3 times because they just couldn't penetrate my skepticism. But I posed the question to him like this: If I go and I knock on your door, do you have the capability to shoot me in the face like immediately upon opening the door? And I'll pose that question to you here now. If I knock on your door, do you have it in you without any kind of context or any kind of consideration about who I might be or what I might be there asking for or whatever, do you think that you would just immediately pull out a gun and shoot me in the face?
I would not do that. Given
Would
you know,
that-
not having any other. Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
Okay. Do you think, like, whenever you open the door to somebody, does that ever occur to you to just pull out a gun and shoot a person in the face?
No, I've never thought that when someone knocks on my door and I don't know who they are to this point.
Okay. So, I mean, just using this basic example here, I guess, I feel like not everybody has all of the options available to them, because one, not only does it not present to you to shoot the person in the face, but also I feel like I get the feeling from our limited interaction here that that's just not something that you could do. Like, that's just not part of your character. Am I correct in that assessment there?
I'm going to go ahead and say yes. I'm not going to kill a random person who knocks on my door. Just so I don't freak out the audience at the very least.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me a minute.
Yes, let's.
Excuse me a minute. Erika, can you please check Discord?
Surely can.
So,
yeah, so it seems to me, if I could just make a few comments here, you actually are affirming, like I do, that the future is indeterminate, but that the range of options is possibly slightly more restricted or limited than what I would possibly affirm. But at the same time, that seems to be still in conflict with the scientific, I don't know, materialistic paradigm, which says that there's only one possible future.
No. So, I disagree with that assessment of like how I feel about it. Because I mean, I was just handling whether or not free will exists in that particular situation. Now, as far as determinism goes, I've actually had to think about this quite recently because, I believe it was Jimmy, Snow, that was like, he just asked me about it and I just had to really sit there and ponder about it for a while. And I feel like if we think of reality as like a system, and you input the reality, takes inputs and it has outputs that goes into the next situation or next instance or whatever, not of reality, but like in moments or whatnot. If we were to rewind today, right, to the beginning of the day, had all the exact same inputs, I would make the exact same decisions that I made today. Like, there's nothing that I would change. How could I change anything about today, any decision that I made today, if all of the inputs going into this block that we're calling today, how could I make a different decision? Like, how could that reasonably change if all of the inputs are the same? I mean, that's like asking if you have like two AND gates, welded, or not welded, but I'm not an electrical engineer. I'm a computer engineer. If you had two AND gates connected together and you put inputs into that particular system, are you going to have different outputs depending on what time every time you run the test? Are you going to have different outputs to the system, or is it always going to be the same?
So really quick. So sorry to interrupt. Anthony, you are crackling like super badly. Is there a chance you could try? I'm not sure what's causing the crackling. Or do two things for me. One, make sure you're not on speakerphone, and two, pull back from your mic, like maybe about 6 inches or something like that. I just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep you from crackling. Because if the crackling gets too bad, then we're gonna have to discuss your question without you able to respond. Like take you off the call, and I don't want to do that.
Let me try. Is this any better?
That is significantly better. Yes.
Okay. All right, let me try to keep it like this then.
Yeah. However you're currently doing it, keep it that way. You're good.
Okay. Well, okay, so responding to John about the inputs, I guess the point about free will is that what determines what you do, the ultimate input, is your mind, your will. So your mind is a substantive.
Right. Sorry to interrupt. And I understand what you're saying here. Let's shrink down this system that I'm talking about to just being your mind, right? Let's shrink it down to that. If all of the same inputs are applied to whatever decision you make, like whatever life experiences you have up until X point in your life, you have those inputs to your system, and then there's going to be an output. How does that change? You're talking about, I guess it really kind of depends on how you view minds in general, because I don't think minds are magical. I think minds are chemical machines. They react to certain stimuli, like Erika was saying earlier. So given if all of the stimuli that work into certain point X in your life are the exact same going in, no matter how many times you rewind the clock back to the beginning of that situation, how does your brain operate differently than it already has, before you rewound the clock?
Okay,
like,
so
are there any other?
Well, first of all, what you did was you conflated brain and mind, where to me they're different things. So that's the first thing I would like to say. But yeah, so your mind makes its decision based on the input. So to give an example, let's say you come to a fork in the road and you don't know which one leads where. So your mind has no reason to choose one or the other. But if someone tells you, that there's a cliff at the end of one of them beforehand and you're going to go off of it, then you're going to choose the other one. But the point is, you could have chosen either one based on all of your prior knowledge and experiences. When you arrive at that fork in the road, you can't actually choose one or the other, but you are going to make your decision based on the content of your mind. So your mind is what determines.
If I may here, right, this is sort of where the crux of the issue is, right? Like, we have a fundamental difference here in the fact that the mind and the brain are conflated or they're not. Either they're the same thing or they aren't. And my position on free will, versus determinism, which again, I tried to show is informed, at least by what we can tell are relatively objective empirical studies, right? My brain fires for me to pick something up before I realize that's what I'm doing. It's a fraction of a second, but that does seem to be what's going on. If the mind and the brain are one and the same, then that experiment in and of itself provides a lot of reason to doubt that free will is something that exists. It provides a lot of reason to doubt that we are not simply the product, not so simply, I mean, it's incredibly complicated and rich, right? But that we are not the product of our experiences, our genetics, our hormones, and so on and so forth, and the how we interact with others around us. So what I'm saying here is that it seems that the issue isn't so much free will versus determinism, it's body mind, it's dualism. Can you support the notion that the mind is something that's separate from the body? And that's a completely different conversation, I think, than the one about free will. Do you think it's fair to say that if the body and mind, if the brain and the mind are one and the same, there isn't a case to be made for free will? Would it be fair enough, do you think, to say that at this point?
I agree. Yeah, it does come down to whether if the brain equals mind, then there is no free will. I agree with that.
Okay, so then I think that what we need to do is move the conversation a little bit here to dualism. Can we show or can we not show that the body and the mind are one and the same? And to sort of offer my position on it, it's exactly the same as the free will versus determinism conversation. Is it impossible that there is some sort of a ethereal quality to the mind, that there's a spirit or a soul or whatever? I don't think it's impossible. I'm pretty friendly to the idea of it, to being open-minded to it. But the reason why I don't believe in it is because I don't think that there's currently evidence to support the notion, which I would be interested in what you can provide here. As far as I can tell, we are what our brains are. We are our brains. It's a classic example, but usually what people go to is Phineas Gage, wholesale personality changes because you mess with the gray matter, you mess with the white matter, you screw up the brain. and the person isn't the same. It seems to be that their personality, what makes them them, is radically altered when you screw with what's in their skull. And so I'm going to go ahead and quickly punt it to John to see what he thinks about that, and then back to you, Anthony, to see what you think about it. Keep in mind, stay far away. Do whatever you were doing before, because you were crackling again a little bit just recently. And I really like this conversation. I want to keep you on the call. So go ahead, John.
Well, I was just going to question, like, considering that we have a lot of medical studies and I guess case studies and all that show how if you alter a person's mind, that their personalities can change. And even so, I'm a diabetic, and when my sugar gets incredibly low, I'm talking like 25 blood glucose points. It's like milliliters per or milligrams per deciliter. Like when it gets low like that, like I'm a dick, right? But I mean, that's because my chemistry is messed up, right? Like that's that happens to me, but it's because of my low blood sugar that I have these kind of mood swings and everything like that. So I mean, that just as simple as that shows that your being can change depending on your current biochemistry, but also if the brain is damaged, you can see changes in people's personalities. The Phineas Gage case is a pretty good example. There's several other cases where people's brains have been damaged, or like they've suffered some kind of brain damage, not like physical damage to the brain, but some kind of brain damage that they've suffered, and their personalities change. Oh, it's a fictional movie, obviously. But it's an older movie, so that might not appeal to some people. But there's this Harrison Ford movie called Regarding Henry, and in that movie he ends up getting shot in the head, right? And his entire personality changes. Of course, he's got to relearn how to do everything, right? But the fact is that like he was like this really top 1%er asshole kind of guy, and then he's immediately turns around and he's like the best guy ever, right? And this is it's a fictional story and anecdotal and everything like that, but I mean, I do feel like it's based on pretty solid evidence that if your brain is damaged, your personality can change. So my question, get all this to get to the question, why does that happen on your view, that somebody's personality would change? And also, what part of a person's brain seems to be magical, or what part of a person's brain is magical? Because I feel like, and maybe that's a bit of a derogatory way of referencing it, but I'm just saying, like, what part of a person's brain is supernatural enough to where it exists independent of of your physical brain?
All right. So there were basically there was one main question, but a number of points made. First of all, is my audio coming in fine, or do I need to do something?
No, you're perfect.
You're fine right now.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me say, I do think that this question weighs in on the general atheism versus theism debate, because if the mind is independent of the physical brain, it would prove to me that there is something beyond the physical realm, which is nevertheless substantively real, which is beyond the means of science to investigate, which I think would, at the very least, support the theistic position. But to respond to some of your points, Erika, you did mention a study which shows that scientists can measure the brain firing before any physical action takes place, and I'm aware of that, and it is true. But in my model, the reason that happens is because when the mind sends the signal to the brain, it takes a short amount of time for that signal to reach the nerves. But let's say they want you to push a button. They can actually measure the amount of time it takes for a signal to get from the brain to the finger. And it's a very small amount of time. It's a fraction of a second, but nevertheless, it's measurable. So
right.
in my model, the mind initiates the signal in the brain, which is at that point measurable, and then only a fraction of a second later does your finger move to push the button. So that's how my model would account for those experiments. Now, as for the general question of why there's any reason to believe the mind is separate from the brain, is first of all, because if you examine the physical components of the brain, at a microscopic level, I see no basis for an origin for a thought or what are called kalia. If you look at the atoms of the brain, they are protons, neutrons, and electrons, and subatomic particles like that. How does science get from that to a field of consciousness in the mind and things like thoughts and desires? So I don't see when you look at the physical structure of the brain, the chemical structure of the brain, at the most basic level, I don't see a scientific basis by which a mind can exist in those physical structures.
So I think I know John wanted to say something here, so I'm going to boot it to him really quickly because I have something longer that I want to say, and I don't want to monologue here. But first, I think again I want to make sure we're being clear with our terms here, make sure that I'm understanding and not strawmanning you. So the mind, you have the mind as divorced from the brain, and then you have consciousness as something that is effectively the mind. Would that be a fair characterization?
Basically, yes.
Okay, so I would argue, and I'm going to boot it to John here in a second and then kind of elaborate on this thought here in a minute, but I would argue that consciousness is an emergent property of our own neurobiology, and I would argue that it is one that is incredibly important with regard to being able to survive and thrive. It actually is pivotal for increasing fitness. And then the sort of tertiary thing I would add to that is I would argue that it's something that is a gradient. It's not something that exists in humans alone, but exists to varying degrees in most of the animal kingdom, and depending on who you talk to, perhaps even extending into other kingdoms of life. So I'll elaborate on that in a second, but John, I know you wanted to say something a minute ago, so go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask real quickly, because in your explanation there, you were like, the mind sends a signal to the brain, and then the brain sends a signal to your finger. I feel like there's a bit of an ad hoc assumption that's worked in there about, the mind being, separate from the brain. I'm just wondering how do you, and I don't know, maybe your previous statements have already stated the evidence for this, but what evidence do you have that it's not just like your brain, like, because we have different parts to our brain, right? Like there's the maybe Erika can help me out with the exact way to say it, but there's the autonomic nervous system. It works automatically. So there are these signals that operate, that work without you having to think about it. So like your heart beating, nails growing, whatever in the hell, like your digestion, like you don't have to consciously think about those things. So what's the evidence that says, oh, well, it's definitely this separate entity that we're calling the mind, and not just some other part of the brain that starts the signal, sending it, throughout the brain, and then the brain transmits it through your nerves to your finger, which is what that delay is it going from your physical brain to your finger. It's not like there's an extra magical step in there where there's some kind of wireless Bluetooth connection between what we're calling mind and your physical brain, right? So it's just your brain sending the signal. I'm just wondering, how do you determine that it's not just the brain sending signals? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do. Well, let me try to answer this. First of all, the experience that humans have is that we are making choices. So to say that we aren't actually making choices and it's just an emergent phenomenon, to me, is not based on observations, but rather presupposition, materialistic. But I'm going to answer your question. Let me get to it. It's logically necessary that the mind, the decision, come before the physical interaction. Otherwise, I can't. If you're going to say humans are deciding to do things, then you can't just say it's a response to stimuli. The decision must be initiated outside of the physical body, because basically otherwise all your body is doing is operating according to natural laws, and your mind or your brain is just basically operating in like a water flowing downhill. It can't change its course. But if I make a decision,
that's not even true for water. I mean, that's not even true for water. I mean, have you seen those time lapses of how rivers change? I mean, water flows and rivers change all the time. So, I mean, I feel like that's a bad example.
That's entirely accountable by physical mechanisms. There's erosion, the
exactly what I'm fucking talking about, though.
Yeah, so I basically kind of, sorry, if I may, I want to hear the rest of what you're saying. So finish. I want to hear you finish your thought, and then I'll jump in.
Yeah, so basically, for a human to actually be making a choice, which is what appears is what's happening, the mind must take precedent over the physical, or what we observe as the physical, because otherwise the choice is an illusion. But it doesn't appear to be an illusion. It seems like we really are making choices, but under the materialistic model, these choices are merely illusions. And there's no basis for them in the physical, the brain.
So it's a tough sort of concept to wrap your head around, and it's indeed quite vast. It's like considering the size of the universe, right? But I would argue that choice, it is kind of an illusion, right? And we are the sort of product of all of these experiences that we have, down to the indecision that we exhibit, right? So my experience, right? I love vanilla ice cream. I love chocolate ice cream. I think they're both good. If I could pick between the two, it's going to depend on the day that I'm being asked. I'm not a solid preference giver for that. And the reason for that is because I've had really good experiences in my past with vanilla ice cream and with chocolate ice cream. And there's probably an element too that plays into my genetics, where both my parents like both of them as well. So when I'm up at the counter and I'm trying to decide between vanilla and chocolate, I keep wanting to switch to strawberry because that's actually, I prefer that to the two of them. But what I end up choosing is going to entirely come down to exposures that I've had over that day and over the past several, weeks and years that I am unaware of. I am not consciously accessing them. So when I'm sitting at the table or sitting at the counter, I'm like, do I want vanilla? Do I want chocolate? Well, maybe I picked chocolate last time, so now I want vanilla. Or maybe for lunch yesterday, I had something that was had a vanilla bean sort of flavor to it, and so that pushes me towards chocolate, right? There are all of these different minute experiences that I have across my life that will influence the decision that I'm about to make. But it's no more a decision than natural selection is nature actively selecting. It is a filter that influences what I'm going to do eventually. And I think that it's quite analogous to some of these complex neural networks that we try to create that are complex and rich and beautiful and wonderful, but nevertheless, they will give a certain output with a given input. And so I don't find that to be, alarming or distressing, and I'm not discounting the possibility that there is something external to that at play. What I'm arguing is that in the same way that you might say you're presupposing something natural, I would turn around and say, I'm not presupposing it. I'm pointing to the neuroscience that in the same way when John gave the example of the river changing course, you responded with, no, we can account for all of that naturally. I point to the neuroscience that I mentioned earlier and say, we can account for the decisions that we make naturally, conventionally speaking. Consciousness seems to be this aspect of our reality that is ethereal and difficult to quantify. And I don't deny that. The mystery of consciousness, I think, still exists in science, although I think there are some wonderful hypotheses that exist to explain it. And one of them very well might be the case. I have a favorite myself. But I would propose that consciousness is emergent from the neural networks of our brains in the same way that a river is emergent of the water molecules that are clashing together against one another because they fell from a rainstorm and conglomerated in an area, and they're at a slight decline, so they start moving down, and there's heterogeneity in the sediment, and so they end up carving this very specific path that ultimately was laid out by the geology of the earth millions of years beforehand. And to think otherwise, from my perspective, requires for you to present something that is not explainable by natural means within consciousness, within neurobiology, within gross anatomy and physiology of the brain, that is, I would argue, profound. It would need to be a profound example of something that can't be explained. That's where I'm coming from on this stuff.
Donna, do you have any thoughts? Well, let me respond to that. Oh, okay, go ahead. I guess. No,
I was just gonna say, no, I'm interested in in what you have to say.
Well, Erika, that was that was quite eloquent, but I want to go back to basically what you said right at the beginning, which you did affirm that you think ultimately the choice is an illusion. And what I'm trying to say is, if we just ignore all the philosophy, ignore all the complicated neuroscience, and just go by our everyday experience, it does actually seem at a most basic level, apparent level, that our choices are real. So if that is the case, and I think anyone claiming otherwise is the one making the extraordinary claim, how could you possibly account for real choices, and they appear to be real to me, with a purely materialistic model where consciousness is an emergent property of the brain? And I just haven't seen that done to my satisfaction. And I was kind of, I guess it comes down to, if our choices are real and we really are choosing as it appears to be, then I don't see how materialism, with its kind of set pathway for physical matter, can account for humans choosing to go one way or the other. You see what I'm saying there?
I totally do. And in a brief response, again, what I'm arguing here is that it absolutely feels like a choice. It feels like it, but it's not. And the reason is because when you simplify it, when you go down to simple neural networks or simple organisms that do seem to choose, their choice is, in essence, the end terminus, the current end terminus of all of their experiences, their hormones, and their genetics. So from my perspective, it's difficult to tie down in humans and in other highly cognitive animals like other apes or cetaceans or corvids or proboscideans or whatever, right? Because our neural networks are so intense, but nonetheless, we can't seem to point to something that is truly ethereal. We can point to choice and say it feels like a choice, but it seems like a choice when I observe a flatworm to take one route over the other in its little aquarium. But I don't think that flatworm has an external mind that is telling it to do one thing over the other. And there have been some interesting studies with slime molds as well that seem to point to that as an explanation. Again, I think it's a bit of an impasse because you're incredulous that your experiences could be the end product of something that is so sort of empirical isn't the word, something that is so almost like response stimulus, something that feels more robotic to you, because it doesn't feel robotic when we make choices. It feels informed and rich and wonderful and elegant, right? But I would argue that there's in the same way that you might say there's no reason to think that it's empirical, I would point to these experiments that seem to imply that it is. I haven't seen anything yet other than you saying it feels like a choice, which I agree with, that supports that it's a choice. I wish I could trust my anecdotal experience the way that you do, but when I look outside, the Earth also seems flat, right? When I look at the horizon, I don't see the curve because I'm on the surface of the Earth. That doesn't mean the Earth isn't curved. It just means I'm not at the right vantage point to appreciate it. And this kind of thing happens all the time in science. So that's my story. Again, we might be at an impasse here, and I'm not going to sit here and say, no, there's no shot. We'll never find any evidence for dualism or a soul or something external to the brain. What I'm saying is, at present, if we look strictly at the empirical, as I like to do, it doesn't seem that way. And that's why I'm inclined to be a determinist.
Yeah, and I agree with what Erika said right there, and also I feel like we're at an impasse too, because I don't see a need to introduce a supernatural element to our brains. I don't understand how we would actually be able to test for that or be able to know that this supernatural aspect of it exists. I know that you claim that the ability to choose is a sign of some kind of independence of mind from body. But I don't understand why that makes more sense, because just having the ability to choose does not necessarily denote some kind of like, I guess mind independent of the body. I mean, the animals at every single level make decisions like that. Like, I don't know if you consider all animals everywhere to have this sort of supernatural mind aspect to them. Even the ones that are just run off of basic instinct, that just react, without any kind of higher cognitive function. I guess I just don't see the ability to make decisions as the determining factor for any kind of mind independence. And I feel like that's where we're at an impasse. You believe in the magical version of mind, and I believe in the emergent property that we call the mind.
Okay, well, we can leave it there. Yeah, I mean, I would like to respond, but I know I've been on the line for a long time, so I'm going to yield to other callers. But maybe that's a point of discussion for future: is whether purely materialistic models can account for real choices. So, all right, thank you for taking my call.
I wish I had this. Normally, I'm pretty good at having the study on hand. I tried to look it up while I was sitting here, but my attention was kind of split. Next time, I'll be better prepared. I guess I'm gonna have to buy Determined, because this question has come up enough times that I think it's time that I actually got like super informed on the opinion that I'm holding here, which I think it's not as informed as I would like it to be, to put it that way. But thank you for the stimulating call. That was a good conversation, and I hope you call back.
All right, thank you. Have a good day, or whatever.
Take care. You too. All right. I thought that was a good call. I really enjoyed that. It's like, yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head, where it's like you get asked this kind of question, and you're like, crap. Like, why do I feel the way that I do? Why do I feel like I'm a determinist? Or like, that happens to me constantly, where it's like I hold this position, but I'm like, I need to sit and dissect why I actually think the way that I think.
Right. Yeah. And actually, when Jimmy had first proposed it to me, I really didn't have a good answer for him. I'm like, well, I really don't know. Because, I mean, like, if I haven't really considered something, my first thing to go to is, I don't know what I think about that. Because it's really hard to, like, carefully consider that kind of thing in the moment. I usually like to take a little bit of time and really consider like what I think about it. So, that's what I did. And, for a lot of these things that are like deeply philosophical and these sort of really complicated topics, I guess in my mind, I try to simplify it down into like, I guess, real world examples that's kind of helps me understand like my position, as well as being able to explain it to other people. So that's why I didn't really go into very many, like, I guess, technical things about the mind body problem. I'm very simple in, well, this is my experience. Because of my experience, I simply can't believe in either a magical mind or in like free will, I guess. So I would definitely say that I'm a determinist too.
So it was determined by all your previous experiences, hormones, and genetics, huh? You don't have a choice.
Yeah, no, I agree that in any of the decisions that I've made have been a direct, a direct conclusion of my entire life. So, I mean, there's not a single thing, I guess, that I can regret, because I don't think that I have the option, to make a different decision.
I'm kind of a bonehead with philosophy stuff, but I think it's, that's why I turn to like studies and stuff like that, because it's like, oh, okay, I can point to this, like that makes sense to me. But I tweeted at one point a long time ago, I was like, with the free will debate, functionally, here's how it is for me. It feels like I have free will, and I'm happy with that. I don't think I actually do. I think it was probably deterministic. Maybe it's not, but the evidence seems to point to it being deterministic, right? But it feels like I have free will, and I think that's good enough. For me, it's good enough. And maybe, again, that's my boneheaded anti-philosophy take, because I'm allergic to philosophy, but I shouldn't be. I shouldn't be, but I am.
Philosophy a lot of times goes over my head, and honestly, whenever I respond to like Jordan Peterson or somebody, I usually have to go like sentence by sentence and like break down the words that he's saying.
Yeah. Oh no, same for sure. Like a lot of that, and anyways, we have another call that I'm very eager to get to, and I'm kind of like skipping down again. We have to prioritize our theist callers, and we also have like a theist that seems to be like really kind, and I want to get to them. But we have one that I simply can't help myself because it has chimps in the question. So surely our other callers will understand the allure of that for me. And this has the potential to be like a little bit spicy. So I got my finger handling the mute button ready to go if things get out of hand. Hopefully they won't. But with these kinds of topics, you just never know. So I would like to welcome Annie. No pronouns given. They're a theist, and here's what their question is before I let them in. I'll tell you once you're in, Annie. We supposedly share a common ancestor with chimps, but atheists insist discrimination against outsiders, enforcing social hierarchies, and punish sexual impropriety is wrong. Punishing, I assume, is what you're saying. Sexual impropriety is wrong. Where does this moral superiority above chimps come from? Seems arbitrary. So this is going to be a good one. I'm excited, especially for that supposedly. So Annie, you are on SkepTalk. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Wonderful. Okay, tell me a little bit more about your question. I'm eager to dig into this one.
What else do you want to know? I'm obviously not a proponent of evolutionary theory. I'm a creationist, but I'm not really interested in debating the details of evolutionary theory, but rather how it is applied or not applied to our lives.
I think that's a phenomenal place to start. I wish you would have called and wanted to talk about the details of evolutionary theory. That's my bread and butter, but that's okay. I understand it's a lot of weeds to get into there. So I'm going to answer your question pretty simply. I don't think, and I think I can support this with innumerable examples, that human morality seems to be very much above what we see in the panins, chimpanzees and bonobos. In fact, I would argue that what humans commit, the atrocities that we commit against one another, are potentially even an order of magnitude above what we would propose as barbarism that we see in chimps and bonobos, particularly chimpanzees. We can be absolutely horrible to one another. Now, that being said, I think that you can explain morality being subjective in a couple of different ways, and I think you can make an argument for it in a couple of different ways. I would point to the fact that societies across the world, regardless of who they are, seem to converge on a couple of different pretty basic rules that are ultimately utilitarian in function. Do unto others as you would want them to do unto you, right? Like it's Christ said it, it's in Hammurabi's code more or less, right? Like it's don't kill, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, that kind of stuff. And the reason that these rules seem to exist is that they promote the flourishing of the group. They keep people happy. They keep group cohesion functional, and they allow individuals to thrive and feel, more or less safe and sound. So I think morality is subjective. I think that most people have a tendency towards a very specific morality that benefits our groups and benefits our species once we're at like a global level. And I think that those are good things, right? I define good as not doing harm. I guess I should define evil. Good is like the absence of evil, right? I would define evil as doing gratuitous harm to somebody for selfish reasons knowingly. And I think that's pretty ubiquitous. So with all of that in mind, I guess I can summarize it by saying human morality isn't all that much better than what we see in other animals. And indeed, I would propose other animals have moralities, although we tend to call them proto-moralities. And I would say that our morality comes from a shared understanding that it's good to not feel afraid. It's good to not feel pain. A basic understanding of what utilitarianism seems to be pretty baked into a lot of societies, which is why they converge on a lot of these similar rules. And I think that ultimately that's a good thing. So that's how I would sum it up.
Should I reply to you or wait for it? Okay.
Well, I was just going to say that I think morality is subjective as well, and I think that there's a lot of examples I could bring up if you wanted me to later. but I totally agree with what Erika said here, and I have my own thoughts about morality, own examples, and reasons why, which are probably going to be a lot more, I guess, maybe non-technical than Erika is going to have. But yeah, I'll let you go ahead and respond, and then I'll chime in if I got something worthwhile.
Okay, so there are a lot of points. The first point that I found that I want to address was the idea that the way how we commit atrocities are an order of magnitude above chimps. And from my opinion, I understand that's just an observation. There's an assumption that more death or more or killing at a greater scale is worse or is can be viewed as immoral because we do it more than chimps, like as if chimps are the standard. And I don't think that actually follows. Another point that I wanted to address was that
if I may ask really quickly, I just want to ask you, would you prefer to go point by point, or would you prefer to get your thoughts off your chest first and move forward after that?
I think the second one, because then point by point we'll just get into more tangents and then we'll never get through the whole thing.
Okay,
if that makes sense.
Go ahead. Continue.
And another point that you brought up was that group cohesion promotes flourishing. But I mean, chimps still human beings have been flourishing for from my view, thousands of years, and our population is still growing despite the widespread history of mass murder. So I don't see human flourishing being threatened by our conflicts, even though they are an order of magnitude above chimps, as you said. So I don't feel like that sufficiently. I don't feel like sufficiently grants human beings moral superiority over chimps, such that we shouldn't be allowed to, say, discriminate against an outgroup. We see a lot of conflicts between, or not even a lot of conflicts, the conflict in Israel and between Israel and Gaza, for example. I mean, fundamentally, it's no different than what we would see between two warring tribes of chimps. So where do we say that one is wrong and one is just nature?
So I would propose that it is in our nature to be kind of horrible to each other, right? Like I would agree. What you're saying there, sort of tangentially, is a lot of support for our shared common ancestry with chimps, because most other critters don't commit genocide, and yet chimpanzees, seemingly, other than potentially, depending on how you define it, some hymenopterans, seem to commit a lot of genocide. They don't do it on the scale that we do, but they will systematically wipe out adjacent troops, just because they're a different troop. And oftentimes they'll try to assimilate the females of those troops, which is, again, not unlike what we see in groups of humans. The reason that I don't apply human morality to chimpanzees is because chimpanzees are not humans. I apply human morality to other humans. And again, all humans seem to have converged on a couple of very basic rules across every society, seemingly, that has ever existed. And it all boils down to some different version of the golden rule. And more or less, they have the same laws, right? Going back to the earliest societies that have ever been recorded. Now, again, we're talking about a difference in atrocities here. I'm not talking just about scale. I'm talking about the meticulous nature of evil that humans will afflict on one another. Humans rape at unprecedented scales. We beat those that we disagree with. We systematically genocide them to the degree that there is nothing left. We create weapons to better torture and kill one another. All of these things do not happen in chimpanzees. right? They don't. They happen sometimes to lesser degrees in the case of like annihilating neighboring groups, and they actually don't rape all that often, to be perfectly honest. But humans are quite special. We seem to have taken our xenophobia to the next level. The reason that it's wrong from my moral subjective point of view is because I take a utilitarian standpoint, which is to do the least amount of harm as possible, right? To benefit the most amount of people that I possibly can. Now, a lot of what you talked about with population growth is not in spite of the evils that we do. It is because of our technological advancements. Those two things are pretty divorced from one another, to be honest. So again, we're left at... Sorry, go ahead.
Why are they divorced?
Because they're directly because of technological advancement. The ability of humans to grow at unprecedented rates can be tied to things like medicine and the Industrial Revolution, not our ability to kill one another.
Okay, well, I was asking why they were divorced for another reason, but I can't remember what you said. It wasn't necessarily, like, the answer you gave me, I accept, but it wasn't the question I was asking. So,
okay.
But if you want to, sorry about that.
If I can interject here, I feel like I get that your particular argument is kind of putting us on the defensive, but I'm kind of wondering if maybe at some point we can address, like, I guess the alternative here, and that would be the Bible. Because, like, I feel like all of the things that Erika listed off as far as like how shitty human beings are, like everything she listed is in the Bible, condoned and even said by God that you should do these things. Like Numbers 31 has God commanding Moses to go into a different people group and killing everybody in there, including small children, small boys, and then forcing small girls into sexual slavery where they're going to be raped when they're forced into marriages. So, I mean, if you want to talk about, like, you know, shitty people or anything like that, can we just talk about how shitty fucking God is in the Bible? And I know that you're a creationist. I'm guessing Christian creationist by the sounds of it. And I mean, if you're honestly saying, oh, well, you know, evolution, blah, 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 morality, something or another, but then your particular view is, oh, well, if God says it, then it's okay. So it must have been okay for the Israelites to kill small children. Like, I personally think it's a rather shitty fucking thing to do, to sit there and order your troops to, drive knives into the chests of babies. But it seems like God has directly commanded that on certain occasions. So I really don't think that you need to be on like a high fucking horse right now with your moral sense, because I feel like your particular version of morality that's contained in the Bible is honestly a lot worse than mine.
Okay, so I'm going to start with Erika's point first, and then I'll get to yours.
Okay.
So with Erika, I understand now. I remember what I meant when I asked why are they divorced. The question I was asking is that human beings were a total species, so we're not compartmentalized. Like our cognitive abilities aren't compartmentalized from our moral. From our moral behavior. We are a species. We are a species as a whole. So we're flourishing. You can say that is because of technological advancement, which would be due to our cognitive abilities, but you can't divorce one. You can't divorce the part from the whole, and then say that. Our moral behavior has absolutely nothing to do with our society flourishing. I hope that makes sense. And to move on to,
but I think you absolutely can, right? Like other primates, right? Vervet monkeys, for example, have proto-morality in the sense that they punish things like lying, because vervet monkeys are capable of lying systematically to give themselves an edge on other vervet monkeys, and they punish that. And yet they don't commit genocide, right? You also have bonobos, which are not as tool savvy as chimpanzees are, and yet they do far less of this indiscriminate killing of neighboring groups. But they can also be huge jerks to one another, and they have stronger social systems and can solve problems better depending on who you ask. Right? So these things are connected. I'm not disagreeing with that. But to argue that human flourishing comes because of our xenophobia, racism, sexism, whatever, is patently false and doesn't hold with the rest of the animal kingdom.
No. What I mean is that for the majority of human history, let's say the last 100 years, we've been very tolerant and more global, seeing humanity as a single species, a single family. But before that, we were still flourishing, even though we were warring, even within races, across continents. So
when was the biggest population jump? When did human population grow the most?
In the last 100 years.
Yes. So human flourishing has been facilitated by good attitudes, but also when was the Industrial Revolution?
But I mean, the majority of people, I understand. The scale at which we grow is like an arbitrary distinction. If we grow slowly or if we grow quickly, I'm just trying to keep my thoughts straight.
That's okay.
Okay. Social hierarchies and punishing sexual behavior that we don't like has always existed, and we can still flourish. So
right, but you understand the problem here, right? So like good and bad, as I would define them subjectively, have always existed, but humans have remained under a certain population size, under a certain quality of life, and with a certain degree of consistent suffering for the majority of our existence. Over the past 100 years, one big thing happened, the past 200 years, let's say, one big thing happened, and it was the Industrial Revolution. It was an increase in technology. What that would suggest is that human flourishing, as defined by population growth and an increase in universal quality of life, is directly tied to technology rather than a propensity to be good or bad. Now, I think that that's pretty solid, but I don't...
I didn't argue that it was based on a propensity to be good or bad. You argued that social cohesion allows for human flourishing, but we flourish even when we're not cohesive. So you apply moral value to the scale at which we flourish, but I don't think I have to apply that. I think that's just something you apply value to.
Social cohesion is a part of human flourishing, but it is not the only part of human flourishing. You can have groups of people who are perfectly happy and get along with one another, but they live in horrific conditions. We see this all across the planet. So what I'm trying to say here is that, you don't need a specific Abrahamic morality to get to the point of success as defined by human flourishing that we see today.
That's my argument.
Okay, how about this? Give your points to John, and then we'll come back to me, because I don't want to dominate this entire conversation.
Sure. So John obviously brought up some instances in the Old Testament where God commands Israelites to clear out Canaan, basically. And from my perspective, good is whatever God commands. And since God created everything in the universe, he can do exactly what he wants with it, however he pleases with it. I don't see any moral conflict there.
Okay, so is it good to kill small children?
In instances when God commanded for Israel to kill small children, it was good.
Okay, so I have no reason to actually consider any kind of moral conclusion you fucking come to. So, I mean, that's all. That's all I need to know. And why did you just fucking hear yourself? Like, seriously, what is my opinion on abortion? Do you want to get into abortion right now? Abortion is healthcare for people that get pregnant. That's what I think about abortion.
Okay, well, and God killing children was judgment on a people. So we can all just change
Judgment for what? What's the judgment in Numbers 31? No. What's the judgment that God was handing down in Numbers fucking 31?
Well, I'll have to take a quick look if that's what you want.
Oh, okay. I mean, you can look, or I can tell you. It was because they mixed with another group. Basically, race mixing. That is what God commanded Moses to do when the Israelites mix with another people group.
So can I ask a question to you, Annie? If you had the option, and I'm genuinely very curious about this. I have a point to this that's leading into what John just said. So I'm curious of your position. So let's say that you were in a hospital, and the hospital catches on fire, and you have the choice to save 100 embryos, right, in a tray, or one 9-month-old baby that is born. Who are you going to save? You personally, Annie. What's your choice right now?
As long as I can ask a question after I've answered this one.
Okay.
I would choose a newborn baby. I would choose a baby.
Okay. Ask your question, and then I want to elaborate on that.
There is a single woman, not pregnant, and a pregnant woman who are unconscious in the same building on fire. Which one do you take? The pregnant woman or the woman who isn't pregnant?
Both of them.
Well, then that's my answer too. I take the newborns and all the embryos. If we can just,
I think it's fair. I think it's fair to say that you would try to save them both. But I think the point that I'm trying to make here, like, if you asked me if I would save the pregnant woman over the single woman who was not pregnant because it's saving two people over saving one, I don't think that that's a fair equivalency. Because
why not?
Because she could be 1 week pregnant, she could be 9 months pregnant. If you can give me more information, I can try to answer it to the best of my ability.
I don't think, to me, it doesn't really matter. A pregnant woman is...
It does. But it does matter, Annie, because your answer that you just gave shows me that you understand that there is a difference. No matter what kind of difference you want to classify it as, there is a difference between a 9-month-old child, a born human, fully developed, and an embryo, because you would choose to save one child over 100 embryos. For me, the decision is a lot harder to make, but if there was a pregnant woman who was 9 months pregnant, that is effectively two people. If she's 1 week pregnant, that is completely no difference to me between that individual and the single woman, because I recognize that there is a difference between a 9-month-old born child or a newborn infant and embryos. Now, here's where this leads to. This is the plug-in that I wanted to lead back to John's point. In Numbers, when the Israelites kill the Canaanites, they're not killing embryos. They're killing grown, children, right? Grown male children. They're killing adults. They're killing whoever it is they want to. Do you know what that sounds like to me? That sounds like the rationale that a male alpha chimpanzee would give to the rest of the troop to genocide the neighboring troop. That doesn't sound like something an all-powerful God who is ultimately benevolent would do. It sounds very anthropological. It sounds like something that you would say if you looked over at the Canaanites and said, they've got some cool stuff that we want, we need a reason to invade them. Now, if you want to say sort of cherry on top here from my point of view, if you want to argue for divine command theory, I'm not going to sit here and really argue against it, because you've presupposed that God is real, and you've presupposed that if he wants to genocide people, he gets to genocide people. To that, I'll respond in a theological way. If God made humans in his image, then to some degree, our morality reflects his morality. Why is it that we intuitively understand that killing for no reason, regardless of your society, is wrong if God turns around and does the same thing? It is theologically inconsistent. It is zoologically inconsistent. It is anthropologically inconsistent. And I'll pass it to John.
Just let me respond. Well, just let me respond. Regarding the fetus, different stages of life, and even the newborn, yeah, they're all different, but all things are different. So saying things are different is not a justification for treating them differently. I'm different from a newborn. You wouldn't. Maybe you would give me more credence than a newborn, or you'd give the newborn more credence than me, based on whichever arbitrary standard you have. But fundamentally, the embryo, the fetus, the newborn, myself, the elderly, we're all human beings, and all human beings have the same rights. So, stating the arbitrary difference.
Unless God says otherwise. Unless God says otherwise, and then it doesn't fucking matter.
All human beings.
Right?
Well, and we could
I would actually just like to get my point out, because then we're just spinning into tangents onto tangents. So
okay,
but what you're doing right now is called gish galloping. You're just throwing a whole bunch of shit out there, and then we're not actually able to respond to all of the bullshit that you're saying. I mean, that's how I felt this entire time, is you're just gish galloping.
Well, I'm sorry you felt that way, but I would also like to point out that Erika just gave me 3 points, and that's what I'm trying to respond to right now. So
how about this?
All human beings
I don't want to monopolize the conversation and have John have nothing to say. So I'm gonna ask this. I want you to respond to what John said, and then you can have the last word on our conversation while we're both on the call. That's fine with me, but I'm not trying to monopolize this. So I would appreciate if you would start with your response to John, and then whatever you say to me, I'm gonna stay quiet for a little while. I just don't want to monopolize this. It's the Annie and Erika show. You know what I mean? So let's try to move this over to John.
It feels like that I understand, but it feels like you get to make a point, and then when I try to make a point, then we have to move on to John.
I don't want you to feel that way, which is why I'm saying you can have the last word on that statement while we're both on the call. You can have it; it's fine. But go ahead and deal with John right now, because you and I have been talking for a while.
Okay, could John repeat what his objection was?
Go ahead, John.
Well, so my objection to this is that you say that everybody is valuable, or everybody has value in some kind of sense, but at the same time you have to add an asterisk to that, because the asterisk is unless God says otherwise. So basically, if you can justify why another group of people should be treated differently, or should not be allowed to live, then their lives are not worth anything, which makes the previous statement a false statement, that everybody's life matters. Like,
I didn't say everybody's lives matter. I said everyone has the same human rights. All humans have the same human rights.
That right, which is still, like, however you want to phrase it, however you want to word it, it's still a false statement, considering what you said earlier about your own moral foundation, that God is the one that dictates things. If God says that person shouldn't be allowed to live, then then you're fine with depriving that person of life, liberty, and happiness. So no, not everybody has the same rights. I mean, I'm guessing that you would totally simp for Leviticus, was it 2018, 2019, whatever, the one that talks about how gay people should be stoned to death. I'm guessing that you would totally simp for that one, right?
That's a loaded question.
No, it's not. It's a direct question.
I
get it.
Question. I can't answer it with yes or no without giving clarification.
So you can't answer the question, should gay people be systematically killed, with an easy yes or no fucking answer? There's got to be, like, heavy nuance to the answer of that particular fucking question. Really?
You said I would simp for the scripture. You didn't ask me that specific question. Would I simp for the scripture is a loaded question, because I would support it under certain context. I think it is a valuable scripture, and it's meaningful.
Okay. So sorry. I know I'm stopping you really quick, but in what context is systematic killing of LGBTQ individuals ever okay?
I said the script. I would simp for the scripture.
Okay, and then you talked about in certain contexts. And then you talked about in certain contexts, And like that's where the nuance lies. What context is okay?
So if somebody came to, like you're doing right now, and told me, would it be okay to stone gay people? I would say no. Then you would turn around and say, oh, so that means you don't support Leviticus, does it? And go ahead.
I mean, I'm saying that, yes, that's what Leviticus says. Leviticus says, and it's reinforced in other places, that you should definitely stone gay people. And I mean, if you sent for the scriptures, then you're perfectly fine killing gay people.
Does it command Christians to do that? Or Israelites under an Israelite theocracy that no longer exists?
What did Jesus say about the Old Testament laws?
I asked you a question. It's yes or no.
Sorry, can you ask the question again then? Because my question was to further answer yours.
Was Leviticus commanded to Christians, or was it commanded to Israelites under an Israelite theocracy that no longer exists?
Okay, then my answer, instead of asking you a question, would be that Jesus said to keep the laws of Moses, and that not one iota of the laws of the scripture would fade away, until he's, come back again. So it kind of seems like under certain kinds of interpretations, you could definitely say, hey, Jesus is perfectly fine with this.
Where does Jesus command Christians to keep the law of Moses?
I mean, I can look up the scripture for you, since you're not going to look for it. But I mean, I've also got a computer right here, so I'm a bit privileged in that kind of aspect, I guess.
What does what does Jesus say about young Earth creationism?
Fucking nothing. Matthew 5:19. Does he?
Sorry.
He defends young Earth creationism. He affirms Adam and Eve as realities.
Is that young Earth creationism? Because I know plenty of creationists who are evolutionary creationists or old Earth creationists who believe in a literal Adam and Eve, but also accept that evolution is something that happens and the Earth is very ancient. What does Christ say that supports young Earth creationism? Just out of curiosity, while John was looking stuff up.
He affirms the existence of Adam and Eve as realities, and in addition to that, the Gospels start with a genealogy. So
yeah, but that doesn't support young Earth creationism, does it? Because you could also point to Genesis 6. You could point to the Cain and Abel stuff, when Cain leaves to find his wife elsewhere. You could talk about the fact that when people talk about the world in the Old Testament, they're not actually talking about the entire world, but they're talking about the region of Mesopotamia. I mean, you're leeching it of all the hermeneutics.
When they're not. Cain, for example, didn't find his wife elsewhere. He married one of his sisters.
Oh, I'm sorry. What verse is that?
It's implied.
Oh, okay. I see. Because my understanding was, it said that Cain went off and found a wife. You don't find your sibling, Annie. You know your sibling. And moreover, it talks about after Abel is killed by Cain, there's a specific verse that discusses how Seth was born to replace Abel. And then Adam and Eve have multiple other children long after Cain has found his wife. And moreover than that, who is he afraid will kill him? Because at the time that he kills Abel, there's only Cain and Abel, Annie. The only person who he could be afraid of, other than Adam and Eve.
Where does the Bible say there was only Cain and Abel? If the Bible doesn't say there was only Cain and Abel, because Cain was afraid of being murdered by other people. So there were other people, including Cain and Abel. And since Adam and Eve were the first two human beings, those other people were their siblings, and probably even their nephews.
Nope, because temporally that happens after. It talks about how Seth is the replacement for Abel after Cain leaves. And then it literally says, and then they had other children. Like, hermeneutically, this is sound, Danny. There's a reason why no Jewish scholars think that young Earth creationism is legit.
Could you please just quote the verse where it says, and then, because I'm searching.
I like how we ask you. Well, I like how we ask you to cite a verse, and then you're like, it's implied. and you don't give us a verse, but then you demand a verse from us. Like, I feel like this is very double standardy.
I mean, I'm saying it's implied, so I wouldn't provide a verse. And if you're saying there's a verse, then provide the verse.
Well, it's like the entirety of that chapter. I mean, it's literally that entire section, right? When it talks about after Abel is killed by Cain, God commands Cain to leave. Cain is afraid to leave because if someone will find him, they'll kill him. He finds a wife elsewhere in the land of Nod or city of Nod with what? 2 people? I mean, it's absurd. No one hermeneutically buys it. And then it says that Eve and Adam conceived Seth, who was a replacement for Abel, and then they had other sons and daughters. They had other sons and daughters after the birth of Seth, who was born after Cain already bailed. I mean, this is like really, really like, I get that you're coming from a perspective of like, oh, answers in Genesis or CMI or ICR say XYZ, but they are not presenting hermeneutically sound scriptural interpretations. Now, what I would like for this, because I think you should go and read this, see what you decide, find out what you.
You're making a point, and you're not even letting me respond.
Hold on. So I'm gonna mute you here just for a second. I'm gonna unmute you here in a second. The reason why I'm saying that we're changing topics is not because I'm trying to get a one-up on you. It's because I derailed the conversation while John was looking something up so that we could fill the airtime, and he didn't get to finish his conversation with you. Now, I'm going to boot it over to John here so that you can continue to talk with him. If you feel that I'm incorrect on this, feel free to call back, or I'm going to give you the closing statement between you and I, and you can say your fill on that and the abortion stuff from earlier if you'd like. I think that's fair. I don't think I'm being a mean host here. I don't think I'm being unfair. In fact, I would argue that I'm being far more charitable than most hosts of this show, and I shouldn't be being that charitable. So I'm going to give it to John, and then I'm going to unmute you, and you guys can talk about your thing so I can quit derailing the conversation. John, go ahead.
Okay. So just to reorient the conversation here, talking about where does Jesus support the commandments of the Old Testament and everything like that. There's a number of ones that I could bring up, but just a very quick Google search rendered Matthew 5:19, where it says, and this is Jesus talking, he says, "Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven." So this is basically Jesus reaffirming to his Christian followers, or well, I mean, they will be Christian after he dies and resurrects in the story, right? Later on. But his followers, and assumingly, since this is in the Gospels, it's to all Christians too, saying, hey, in the Old Testament, if you set aside any of these commands, even the least among them, like even the smallest ones, then you're the least in heaven. Whereas if you keep and practice them, then you will be called great in heaven. Basically emphasizing how important it is to keep the laws of Moses. So, I mean, you can definitely see how under certain interpretations of the biblical texts, you could definitely see how Jesus would support the stoning of LGBTQ individuals.
Okay, Annie, I'm unmuting you. You're good to go now. If you're still there.
Okay. What do the verses say before that? From 17.
Okay. Fine. You want me to start at 17? Oh, it gets great. It's better. It's better if I read the entire context. So here we go. 5. Let me. So it's Matthew 5:17. The fulfillment of the law. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly, I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen, will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. And then, therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Verse 20. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of fucking heaven. Added for emphasis.
Okay, so the most important keyword here is that key phrase here is, I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. So the law has been fulfilled in Christ. We are no longer under the law. They haven't passed away, but we are not under them.
Where does Jesus say that we are no longer bound by the laws of Moses?
It's not, the Bible is a complete text. So we have Paul and his explanation of Christ's work on the cross and what that did for us as sinners. And that's where we get our fuller understanding of how the law applies to our life. But what Jesus said is that he came to fulfill them. So the laws have been fulfilled. We are not under the laws. We are under Christ. We are under grace. And when it says that, unless
is everything accomplished? Sorry. Is everything accomplished now? Like, is Jesus done?
Well, when he was on the cross, he said, "It is finished." So I would have to say yes.
Okay, so Jesus is not going to be coming back, right?
Until everything is accomplished. Everything was accomplished on the cross. He said, "It is finished."
I mean, but I feel like this is vague enough to where, I mean, sure, under a certain interpretation, you could take it that way. But also, I think it's equally valid to take it as if until Jesus comes back and fulfills, what he promised to do, being the savior of all mankind at the end of time. I feel like until that moment, you can't really say that it is accomplished or it is finished. I kind of feel like at this point we're portraying Jesus as if he's George Bush on that battleship and like mission accomplished, but he's like half-assed done and he's left a power vacuum in the Middle East. Like that's kind of how I feel about
you can have whatever opinion you want on Jesus in the Bible, but I'm telling you what the Christian belief is, how we rectify our escape from the law. Jesus fulfilled it, so we are not under it.
If I may, Annie, we've been going for almost 40 minutes. This has been a very fun conversation. I've actually very much enjoyed myself, and I know John has too, and I hope you've had fun as well. But we do have some other callers that we got to get to. I don't want to keep everybody here too long. I've been known to filibuster. So what I'm going to do here is this. I'm going to give you a couple, like a minute or so. Please give your final thoughts. Don't forget you had some stuff that you wanted to say to me as well earlier. I want to make sure that you get your fill and feel like you've been heard. And then we're going to move on to another caller. And I greatly encourage you to call back again anytime, any opportunity, because it seems like you got a lot on your mind. And I think there's a lot to hash out. So go ahead. The floor is yours. Give us your thoughts. Give us your closing thoughts here.
Okay, so back to the abortion issue. All human beings are all fundamentally the same. We all belong to the human species, therefore we all have the same rights. To deny one group of human beings' rights is arbitrary. To deny the fetus rights would be based on his location, which is arbitrary, his size, which is arbitrary, his capacity, which is arbitrary. All human beings are equal and deserve the same rights, the same protections under the law. In terms of Genesis and whether or not it necessitates that, whether or not the text suggests that Adam and Eve did not have any daughters after Seth, that does not follow. The Bible doesn't say that they only had sons and daughters after Seth was born. And to conclude, I don't think my original question was answered at all, which was how we find moral superiority over chimps who do the same things as we do. We are told I was told, or it was explained to me that hello?
Yeah, no, we're still here. We're
Hello?
just giving you the time that you want. Continue.
Okay,
Please continue.
It was really silent. It was explained to me that the difference in magnitude between the evils committed by humans and chimps would suggest that humans are particularly worse and would give us grounds to limit how we exercise the behaviors that we see chimps practice. But I didn't find that very sufficient, since human beings still flourish. And yes, we flourished over the last 100 years because of technological advancements, but our brutality has also scaled up to reflect that. So I think that, and so to once again reiterate that we can't compartmentalize technology and morality. We're one species, and everything that we do has been, according to evolution, has evolved to help us survive. And that would include the behaviors that we see practiced in chimps and in animals to help to restate that, the behaviors that we see in chimps and humans, even though there's a difference in degree, they are fundamentally the same. And I do not think that I was given a good justification for why one is permitted or seen as natural and another is seen as unnatural or excess. And that's all I'll say on that.
Perfect. I mean, I feel like we weren't heard very well, because the point was that they aren't different. What we do is not superior to what chimpanzees do. So I wish that would have gone over better, but I hope you'll call back. I hope you'll have another conversation with whoever's coming next. Thank you so much, Annie. Please do take care. And okay. Wow, that was an intense one. I mean, I hope that wasn't too much. I want to make sure she felt like she was heard, that she got her last word. Obviously, I still have points. I was checking the chat, and there were some folks in the chat who were confirming what I said about the Genesis verses, and then also I really like the direction that you went, John, with like, okay, I mean, you want to say that all humans are right under the eyes of God, but if you really want to say that, it kind of doesn't seem that way. It doesn't seem to play out that way. I mean, I think the very fact that she chose to save a child over a tray of embryos, 100 of them, which if they are equivalent to a human, that's some really interesting utilitarian math going on there. But, what can you do? And at the very end, I'll just say I don't think we were heard, because from the very beginning, both of us were like, no, that's the point. We're not morally superior to chimpanzees. We do a lot of the same shit that they do, and oftentimes make it a whole lot worse. We do a lot of awesome stuff too, amplify those aspects of us, but our cognition has often led us down a trail of ruin, unfortunately. So yeah, that was a winner as well, though.
Yeah, I know. And I mean, to be quite honest, I feel like all you have to do in situations of like, I guess this is just for anybody out there that may be having like moral conversations, or like somebody trying to get up on like a moral high horse when they're obviously Christian. I feel like those are important questions to ask, people. What do you think about God doing this in the Bible? Like, Numbers 31 is my go-to for that. And, of course, they always pull out, well, Jesus didn't like that or didn't command that or anything, but there are verses that you can pull out easily. Like, even if you don't know the verses, it's literally just a Google away. All I had to do was Google Bible verse, Jesus says, follow Old Testament. And like, boom, like there's so many different sites that come up and direct like links to like Bible verses that you could bring up. And it's like, I thought it was really hilarious when she's like, what's the surrounding context? Oh, please, let's mention the surrounding context, because it doesn't help. And of course, obviously tried to spin it.
I mean, like, I've always found it so confusing, right? Because my understanding is that the Bible is pretty clear, and I'm no biblical scholar, let me make that clear, but my understanding is that God is supposed to be like a relatively consistent force, right? His nature is that of informing you of the truth of things, of the reality of things, which that's why I like to bring up Romans 1:20 with young earth creationists, because it's like creation shouldn't deceive, and then the entirety of creation is like screaming that the earth is ancient and that humans are evolved. So that's kind of a side note. But then it's like, why would the God of the Old Testament behave in such a very specific, very, old sort of tribally nomadic human kind of way? And then Christ turns around in the New Testament and is like, peace and love, man. Like, objectively a lot more chill than the God of the Old Testament. And yet they're also sort of, it's like a triune situation where like they're the same guy, but they're also kind of not. That was always very confusing to me. And, I was perfectly happy as, being a theistic evolutionist for quite some time during my life. And then it's like the problem of evil is something that just slaps you upside the head. And like the nature of God in the Old Testament, where it's like he says, do all of this kind of grotesque stuff. I couldn't square that. And I don't think Annie could either, which is why the response is usually just divine command theory. It's like, well, God made the little army men. If he wants to have them war against each other and destroy one another, that's his prerogative, because he is the Imagineer in the situation. And I find that alarming, and I find that disturbing. So, it is.
I agree. The entire conversation was alarming and disturbing, personally. I think that if you find yourself having a complex and nuanced answer to would you kill LGBTQ individuals or support the systematic killing of LGBTQ individuals, I think if you have a complex answer to that, then there's no point in continuing a conversation, because it's very obvious I don't give a fuck about your moral conclusions.
So, and like to that point, like, and sort of as our segue here, I feel like the verse that you presented, and again, I'm not a biblical scholar, but I feel like the fact that you were like, look, if you want to interpret it this way, where Christ is saying like the fulfillment of the law is something different, like be my guest. Annie's response wasn't, yes, it's definitely that interpretation. Christ isn't saying do what the Old Testament said. He's saying don't do it anymore. Her response was basically like, well, if God says it, it's all good, which is like, that's such an alarming way of looking at it. Instead of taking the position like, no, God would never say that. Here's my support for that. Here's my hermeneutical support for that. It's like, no, I don't think he did, but if he did, it's chill. And I think that leads very nicely into this next caller. We have one more theist caller and two atheist callers that I would like to get to, if at all possible. This is JP, pronouns she, her, from the United States. She's a theist. And her perspective is like polar opposite of Annie's. She says Jesus will love the LGBTQ community. Prove me otherwise. Jesus is about love. And then her additional information is that she's from the South and she is a Unitarian Universalist. So I'm going to let JP in here. Our atheist callers, I hope you'll stick around. JP, you're on SkepTalk. Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your question.
Yeah, so I'm a Unitarian Universalist, and I think Jesus loves everyone. And I think that if you think Jesus is a bigot, then you're basically ceding the Bible to conservatives, and I don't think you should do that.
I guess I'll speak first on this. I mean, I was kind of leading up to this call with what I was just saying to John. I'm no biblical scholar. I don't know the details about, what Christ says versus what the Old Testament says, outside of the fact that Christ seems to be a lot more chill. I'm sympathetic to people who are like, Christ wasn't for all of that Old Testament stuff, but I also don't know enough about the subject to take a stance one way or another. So I think this is going to be a call that you mostly have with John. And what I'll say is that I appreciate the stance that you take, whether or not it's like hermeneutically sound or whatever. I guess it's Koine Greek, so it's a little bit different. But like whether or not it's literarily sound, I'm glad there are Christians like you out there, and I really hope that you influence the people in your life to being as kind as you evidently are. So I'm going to boot it over to John here.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I want to echo what Erika just said. Like, I feel like there definitely needs to be more. There need to be more Christians that have this kind of, I guess, interpretation of the biblical text and of the character Jesus himself. I know how powerful Jesus' opinion is in this respect. I obviously don't care what Jesus said. I feel like I don't have to look to, an ancient story like the Gospels and derive, my moral foundations from it or anything like that. Not to be derogatory towards your position or anything. I'm just saying that I don't feel the need, to look at those things and do that. But as far as like Jesus loving the LGBTQ community from a historical aspect, assuming I'm gonna, anybody that knows me knows that I'm a mythicist, but in this particular respect, I'm going to assume that there was an itinerant preacher named Jesus.
No, are you really? That's a ridiculous position.
Yeah. Okay, well, not the fucking point right now. Yeah, I have had a conversation with Bart Ehrman. You should go to my channel on Godless Engineer and see my conversation with Bart Ehrman, and you'll see it. I have had a conversation.
He probably spanked you.
Let's not make this call. Hold on. No, well, okay. For one, he didn't. It was a conversation that we had, so he didn't spank me. It was a fucking conversation. Number two, this call is about.
Sure, JP, I'm so sorry. I want to hear what you have to say, but I want to make sure that my co-host here gets out what he wants to say as well. I've muted you here for a second, JP. I'm sure John will be cool once he says what he's going to say. We'll let you say what you want to say, and it'll all be good. John, go ahead.
My entire point wasn't to bring up mythicism unnecessarily or anything. I'm just saying that a lot of people know that I am, so to preface what I'm about to say, I'm assuming that Jesus was an itinerant preacher and that Christianity is a religion that's based off of whatever in the fuck he may have done in history. Considering that Jesus was a first century Jewish itinerant preacher, it kind of seems like he wouldn't have had that very favorable of a view, not only on the LGBTQ people in general, but just because of the sentiments at about that time, but also because of the fact that Jews at that time, even Jewish Christians and even later Christians, didn't really have that great a view of women. Now, were Christians maybe a little bit better as far as women go? Maybe in some respects, but I feel like you definitely have to look at the complete context of women, like in the Bible, even in the New Testament. And there's still sentiments, after Jesus's time of Christians invoking Jesus's name. Like for instance, it's a forged letter. I believe it's either 1 Timothy or 2 Timothy, where somebody forged Paul telling women to shut the fuck up and sit the fuck down, and to not teach men and all this other stuff. So it's very obvious that there was this tiered system of people, and that Jesus most likely wouldn't have liked people outside of the heteronormative, sort of group of people. Like, and if you didn't fit that mold, then more than likely you would have been persecuted in some kind of way, at least in the first century, by Jews. So, I mean, that's actually one of the striking characteristics of, like, not only Judaism, but also the kind of Jew and the Jewish Christians, for early Jewish Christians, is that, they were very, misogynistic in nature. They also were very scared of sex, and they were scared of same-sex kind of stuff. And I guess that's all that I got to say about it. I think that if we look at Jesus in a more historical context instead of the more mythological character in the Gospels, I think that Jesus probably wouldn't have liked LGBTQ individuals, but I totally support your interpretation of Jesus loving the LGBTQ community. Even if I feel like it's I'll stop right there. I won't continue with that.
All right, JP, I'm going to unmute you here and take some time, give your perspective. I'm sorry for muting. I'm trying to keep things organized and good to go. You got the floor.
Okay. Well, I really can't get past the point where the engineer guy said that he thinks Jesus is a myth, because that's fucking ridiculous. So
Okay, can you please go back? No, go back. What did I preface my entire fucking spiel? Okay, what did I preface it with?
I wasn't listening because you said Jesus was a myth.
Oh, okay. So my entire monologue there, you just totally fucking noped out, and you just didn't listen. Okay, I get. There's no point in me talking to this.
It was a monologue. It was boring as fuck.
So JP, if I may, right? Like I'll speak sort of here. I'm a bridge builder, you know. I'm not a. Am I? I'm not. But I'm also kind of taking the perspective where, like, I don't know. Well, I don't know like, I wish I could sit here and have like a cogent conversation with either of you about the topic, but I'm simply uneducated in it, and I would be floundering around. You guys would be throwing sources at each other, and I would be drowning. But I think it's important to note here that, like, John's a mythicist, but also I think that you guys could theoretically, like, have this conversation outside of the bounds of that. Like, would you be willing to do that, or do you feel that that's a bridge too far?
No.
Okay.
That's like talking to a flat earther or something.
Oh,
Go fuck yourself.
I'm sorry,
fuck yourself. No, seriously, whatever chair you have right now, turn it upside down and just fuck yourself, okay?
JP, I'm gonna have to let you go, my friend. I'm sorry, but you know, right. I'm trying to build a bridge, and you're burning it down. So I gotta do what I gotta do. I tried, Sean. I tried. I wanted to make that conversation happen.
No, I know. And I mean, I was totally willing. Like, even I get it. He doesn't like my one of my positions that a lot of people don't like me for. That's perfectly fine. I feel like I was trying to build a bridge by being like, look, for the purpose of this, I'm more than willing to set that aside and be like, sure, Jesus was an itinerant preacher, you know, kind of thing. Like, a lot of people want to portray either me or mythicists as being so helplessly like focused on the position when I'm really not, right? Like, I'm just simply not. Like, for the purposes of most conversations, I'm like, sure, Jesus was an itinerant preacher. Can we actually like discuss whether or not he supports LGBTQ people, or considering the landscape of Jewish and Jewish Christian communities in the first century, at least what we know about them, you know, would he have appreciated LGBTQ individuals? I mean, I feel like even people that disagree with me on the whole mythicist thing would be like, well, I mean, you know, he makes some pretty solid points about, you know, Jewish Christians in the first century.
My entire thing is that it's like I'm not a mythicist, but at the same time, like, that doesn't mean that you and I can't agree on the vast majority of things and also have conversations about other things. Like, I'm just not really a big fan of being like, oh, we disagree on this one thing, so we can't talk about anything at all. Like, I mean, do you have any idea the restraint that it took with Annie to not have an entirely creationism conversation? Like, she's a 10,000-year-old young Earth creationist. I want nothing more than to talk about that, but that's not what she called about. So, you know, I'm not trying to make that case. She's not trying to make that case. So we're both in agreement on that, and we can kind of move forward. I wish that had been the case with JP, because, like, I think that by and large, she seems like a great person and the kind of type that's going to be tolerant and chill. I wish that conversation could have happened outside of just like homing in on the mythicism stuff and not letting that one go. I wish that could have been possible, but no, I do not think that it was going to happen. So we call it when we call it. We have 2 more calls, but they're both atheist callers, and I actually think that we can do them pretty quickly because we still obviously have to do super chats. We got to leave a little bit of time for that. Lauren, she, her pronouns, from New York. She's an atheist. She's been waiting for almost 2 hours. I cannot not get to her. She's been so patient. So we're going to hit that first, and then we'll hit our other atheist caller, Patrick Keeham from South Carolina, and then we'll get to super chats. How's that sound?
Good. I'm here for it. What's up, Lauren?
Let's do it. Okay. Well, sorry, I did not let her in yet. Lauren, you are on SkepTalk. Can you hear us?
Thanks so much thanks for taking my call. I'd be here for 2 hours anyway, so I don't mind waiting. So my question, so a little bit of background, I was homeschooled and I was raised on Ken Ham science all the way through. And to make a long story really short, I got through my, yes, I got through my associate's degree and my bachelor's degree in a secular college, kind of just plugging my ears and pretending I didn't know what was going on when evolution came up, but eventually got to graduate school and learned a lot more about the research process and exited the worldview that I grew up in and started trying to learn more about science outside of the young earth creationism that I'd been raised on. And so a part of that was discovering your channel, Erika, a couple of years ago. I'm older than you, but I do want to be you when I grow up. But for you guys specifically, what would you recommend for somebody who's trying to learn science the conventional way? I feel like there's a lot of gaps, a lot of stuff that I missed that I just really want to catch up on now that I'm out of young earth creationism. Kind of like drinking out of a fire hose, and I just don't really know where to start.
No, I completely sympathize and I empathize as well. I did young earth creationism in middle school, and it was a very tough transition moving into public high school. You know, I was already kind of leaving it behind, but it was still like I got into high school, and high school science was just like daunting. It's very daunting. My advice for you is going to be hopefully not too daunting. Similarly, I think your best bet is going to be utilizing like a high school textbook. Like get your hand on one of those used high school textbooks, like McGraw-Hill, whatever, off of Amazon, and peruse it. Right? It teaches in like a very intuitive, very like basic way that, you know, I turn to high school textbooks when I'm trying to refresh myself for like chemistry or physics or things like that, because that's not my background. Like I don't, you know, I have a college textbook for physics, but it's not my go-to because I often forget the basics of that. That's going to be your very best friend for refreshing yourself on the uber basics of like ecology and cell biology and evolutionary biology. But you can also turn to YouTube. There were some wonderful videos with regard to evolution by like Stated Clearly and It's Okay to Be Smart. I believe they just go by Be Smart now. That lay out the basics in a way that is so digestible, and they're in these little chunks of like 10 minutes that I think are wonderful for setting the stage. I actually, you know, I'll give you an anecdote right now. I just got done reading Darwin's Origin of Species. Like I'm reading it cover to cover, back to back with The Descent of Man, which is I've started tonight, or I've started last night. I'm going to continue tonight. I found it to be remarkably digestible, all things considered, and it lays out the case in sort of an argument fashion. So if you feel, you know, brave, like you want to tackle something that was written in the 1850s, early 1860s, I guess, that's also a great text for the introduction of the concepts behind evolution and the historical basis for it, because a lot of that stuff kind of blew me away. Like how many people were sympathetic towards Darwin, how many people accepted it right off the bat, and how dead young earth creationism was in the 1850s, 1860s. It really mostly exists because it received a resurgence in the early 1900s with Seventh-day Adventism and things like that. But my advice to you, to summarize, would be get your hands on a basic high school textbook and just read it, right? Set it by the toilet, turn to it when you're not on your phone. Things like that will be incredibly helpful, and it'll lay it out in a way that I think is intuitive and intentionally for somebody who wants to soak up that really basic background. I could even use a high school textbook in the subject every now and again because it's so clear and straightforward in what it's saying. Number two, best friend is going to be educational YouTube channels like Stated Clearly or Be Smart or PBS Eons, things of that nature that are going to help you hone those basics like mechanisms of evolution. How do we know evolution is true? Learning it from the ground up. And then lastly, if you feel brave, getting some historical context on some of that stuff with Origin is just wonderful. And really, it's kind of a phenomenal read. I mean, like, I know I'm kind of like hyping up Darwin. That's like the meme, right? Like the atheist, agnostic, whatever is like hyping up Darwin. But it really is kind of all it's cracked up to be. And, you know, I'll show my own channel, right? Like I try to do the basics of evolution education and many other channels that I love and try to support as much as I can. Dapper Dino, Forrest Valkai, Dan of Creation Myths, Zach B. Hancock for population genetics. There are just a million folks out there who are doing their absolute best to make evolution education and biology education in general digestible. Does that help?
Yes, that definitely helps. Especially, I'm a librarian, so I'm always going to take book recommendations. I love that.
Oh,
yeah, I sometimes wish there was somebody who had remedial science for X young Earth creationists, XEX. I still haven't found that yet.
See if you're. I actually had this sitting underneath, total chance. Sign of the universe. This is a book called The Tangled Bank, An Introduction to Evolution by Carl Zimmer. It's a wonderful text with just oodles and oodles of great phenomenal illustrations that goes over the basics and transitional forms and the mechanisms of evolution and the history behind it. It's called The Tangled Bank by Zimmer. I think it will probably be at your library, and you can just sit there and leaf through it. The pictures are great. It's an easy thing to read. And then take it from there. You're in a great position being a librarian. And if you want, once you get to the point where you feel comfortable with the concepts, email me and I can give you as many recommendations as there are stars in the sky for books that can elucidate further on this, that, or the other thing subjects in evolutionary biology.
I was going to add one thing because sometimes I discuss evolutionary topics on my channel and respond to creationists in particular, and one of the better websites that I found that has a really good list of creationist claims, and then they go through the studies that actually disprove the claim, and they list them out, they cite them to where you can find them and everything like that. And that's Talk Origins. I don't know if you use Talk Origins, Erika, but I know I've found a lot of use in that because especially if you have a hyper specific creationist thing that you want to know, well, what's the answer to this? You can go there and they have it broken out by subject and all that kind of stuff. And you can find it really easily. You can even in a Google tip. I'm not trying to mansplain anything about this, but if you Google just Talk Origins and then your question, more than likely you're going to be taken directly to a good answer for whatever question you might have, and then subsequent tangential questions that could help you out there. And then I also another website that I've used is actually a Berkeley evolution website. Yeah, I've used that several times before. That's a pretty good resource. So I don't have all of the knowledge about the textbooks. So I mean, that's great that Erika was able to give that. But I typically I'm working on the fly unless I'm working in some place where I actually have the textbooks, behind me. I was trying to actually look for Jackson Wheat and R.J. Downard. They have a book called The Rocks Were There. They go through and they handle a whole lot of creationist claims in that. And I believe that they're trying to work on volume 2 now. So definitely that's another good book to have. Not a textbook, but it is a good book.
Oh my gosh, it's got enough information to be a textbook. I mean, Lauren, it depends on what you want, right? If you want the background, you're looking for the biology that you feel like you missed, a high school textbook, and then subsequently a college textbook on evolution, phylogeny, or genetics, or cell biology, whatever. That sequence is going to be wonderful because it's going to cover all the basics in tandem, as they are laid out to somebody who's new to the subject. Which I think everybody could use a refresher on that kind of stuff. If you're looking for creationist debunking specifically, John is absolutely correct. Jackson and RJ are wonderful. I cherish them as friends greatly. Their book, The Rocks Were There, is a great encyclopedic source for what has the Answers Research Journal put out recently, and what's the history behind the claim, what were creationists saying in the 1950s about this, or whatever. Phenomenal for that. Talk Origins, I have to give a boost to as well, as John said, because the thing about Talk Origins is it has not been updated in 15 years. I love Talk Origins because it still works. Because as someone incredibly intimate with the young Earth creationists and the creationism generally claims, they haven't updated their material in 15 years. So, when Ken Ham is talking about something like irreducible complexity or soft tissue in dinosaur fossils, or when Ken Hovind is bringing up lunar recession or whatever, when they're bringing up all these arguments, Talk Origins has got it for you, and they've got it organized in a easily findable fashion. It should be not very difficult. And they source their claims. It's really wonderful. I'm hoping someday when I graduate with the PhD, I'd love to get an updated version of Talk Origins with the connections that I have going. I think it would be a wonderful resource, but I don't have the time for it right now.
All right. Well, excellent. Thank you so much for your answers, guys. That's excellent. I'll definitely call back if I find a question more specifically as I'm learning more about this. But yeah, thanks again. I'll let you guys get to the next caller before the night's up. And again, thank you so much.
Lauren, thank you so much for waiting, and thank you for your inquisitive mind. And if you have any questions further, my email is open. I'm late on getting back to them these days. I get too many of them, but I try to get to everything eventually. Shoot me an email. I'd be happy to help however I can.
Okay, great. Thanks. Night, guys.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye,
okay,
Lauren.
John, we got one last caller. You ready?
I'm definitely ready. Yep.
Let's get her done. All right. Patrick, pronouns he, him, from South Carolina. He's an atheist. He says, I've recently deconverted, and it says, wondering if he'd ever been a Christian, which is an interesting, not as up my alley as the last call, but I'd love to hear an elaboration. Patrick, welcome to SkepTalk. Can you hear us?
Yes, hello. How are you?
Wonderful. How are you?
Good. It's been a couple months, but the other host, the other host should possibly remember me. I was the one that called, and the last time I was on, I was a theist, and I was talking about specifically like my my time in the church and stuff like that, and how I grew up in the church, and I couldn't really answer why, like the actual question, like why do I believe? So, and it's gotten me to this point. So.
Okay. Yeah. No, I see the previous call note, and yeah, I mean, I believe I remember you.
Yeah. And so and I thought about it, and more, and and one of the things I did, the first things I did was I literally, to help me kind of break down how I thought was, I wrote everything down. I started out why do I believe, reasons, and then I only got to probably 4 reasons or something, or 3, and then when I wrote why I'm scared to be an atheist, then it became a bunch. Came 6 or something, so. And so I was like, well, what is it? And so that question led me to call the atheist experience, and then and me talking about that, and they were like, yeah, I mean, it seems like you don't have that many reasons to really believe.
Yeah.
And I kind of broke those things, most of those things, the reasons why I believed was faith and personal experience and stuff like that, and I already knew that those weren't really a good, they weren't really good reasons.
Yeah. Okay, good. I know the call note says that you're wondering if you had ever been a Christian, and so I mean that's how you're feeling right now, like you're questioning whether or not you actually were a Christian to begin with.
Yeah, I talked to the call screener, and that was what they put it as. What I the topic really, I would say, would be did I become a atheist too easily? I feel like the amount, because usually how I think about it is that I ran out of reasons to believe, instead of I don't have any more. I don't have a reason to believe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even though those kind of are the same thing.
Right. Well, so I mean, just speaking from my own personal experience, and I don't know how many people actually know this about me. I've said it before on my channel, but I don't expect people to know me. But I sort of stopped believing in the Christian God, kind of like a light switch. But as far as being an atheist, it did take me a little bit longer to be comfortable with that idea. For me personally, a friend of mine at the time, after a softball game, a church softball game, nonetheless, told me like, well, unless you believe the Bible front to cover or front to back, as like literal history, then you're not really a Christian. And so I'm like, well, I can't believe that. So like, am I really a Christian or not? And so I recognize that now as a no true Scotsman fallacy, right? Like that definitely shouldn't have convinced me that I wasn't a Christian at that point. But what it did do was get me to realize that like I couldn't believe in this God that has so many obviously incorrect things written about it, and that the Bible is so incorrect in its history, and so incorrect on a lot of moral decisions that are made in the Bible. Like I couldn't believe in that particular version of God. But then I had to sort of grapple with this idea of God in general, and much like you, like I started listing out the reasons why I believe in God. I started really seriously considering it. And, I eventually came out of that side, however long it took me. I eventually came out as, deciding, well, I just don't believe in a God anymore. And I think that was the biggest hurdle for me to get over, was admitting, that I didn't believe in a God. Because I live in a very Christian and conservative area, North Alabama, for anybody that doesn't know. I live here, and it's just always been taught to me that God exists, and it like has been ingrained to me that it's like wrong to think otherwise, and so like that was the biggest problem for me. And I've never looked back and thought, well, I wasn't really a Christian. I try to look back with as honest of a lens as I can, and I know that I truly believed in God, and regardless of my reasons, truly believed, because I knew at the time, like, that's just what I believed. And so I feel like if you're wondering if you ever if you feel like you left religion too quickly, I would say putting any kind of time frame on it as like a standard time frame or an appropriate time frame, I feel like that is putting way too much pressure on you. Like, oh, well, do I really have to stew in the oven for like 4 or 5 years before I, come out, as an atheist or something like that? I think everybody has their own respective timeframes in which they come to grasp with reevaluating their worldviews and reevaluating why they believe things. And so I feel like you shouldn't put any kind of time constraint on it. And I talked about this yesterday. If you find yourself like, having these kinds of doubts, just, go through that list again of reasons why, you don't believe, or reasons why you used to believe. And, just do a quick reevaluation of it at that point, understand why you don't believe anymore. And it does get easier as time goes on. And I mean, that's worked for me personally. I don't mean to sound like a therapist or anything like that. This has been my own personal experience, not only with therapy, but also with, leaving religion in general. So don't take it as any kind of like medical advice or anything like that. But I found that method helps me with those kinds of, I guess, intrusive thoughts, I guess, that come up sometimes. Erika, were you wanting to add something? You kind of looked like you were holding it back.
No. This is just me. This is my listing face. I'm just tuning in.
Okay.
Patrick, did that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, like, a lot of times I'll hear that, like, it's kind of, because like it's hard to define what actual Christian is. So like it's like and like a lot of the denominations disagree on each other. So like I'm like it's kind of hard to tell if someone is like technically a Christian or not, but like but you like I would say for me, like like everybody else in my life would tell me that like I was a Christian, like regardless of like, because like one of the things like that I'm struggling with is because I didn't really grow up reading the Bible or anything. Like I'm like just starting to read the Bible to try to like to understand like some stuff so I can kind of understand what my family mindset kind of is in a way, or why they or why they think this way. But I don't I don't like but I don't I didn't grow up reading it, and I didn't really and my like view on how the history of like of like the Bible and science and stuff like that was kind of confused because both of them were completely different. so like it was hard to really think about it, and so like I didn't really think about it.
Okay. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah.
Sorry. I guess was there a question? So I was listening to you, but I must have ADHD or something. So if you, I don't know if you could maybe summarize it. Sorry. Go ahead, Erika.
No. I wanted to kind of interject there because like I feel like you're voicing kind of where you're at, Patrick, and like that's awesome. Like I'm glad to hear, you know, you're having success sort of on your journey and you're looking into all this kind of stuff. And I can see from the call history that you've called in before, and you're curious about things like the history of how like the Bible was written. And I think that's all absolutely wonderful. And you know, I think you got to remind yourself, kind of like what John was saying earlier with this kind of thing. You know, don't be afraid to write down where you're at given points, like keeping a journal of it and then like looking back. There's no wrong way to deconstruct, right? And I mean, if at the end of it you might end up still spiritual, you might not. Like, you know, who is anybody to tell you how to take this journey? It's all entirely up to you. And the point of it is that you're on this quest to figure out like what's true and like what you truly believe. That's a super personal thing, and I think that it's a great sign that you're looking to, you know, the world around you and the people who you know consider to be informed to take that journey. I think you're really on a great path, and I think you'll be really happy with where you end up. Do you have like a question further, like, you know, are you seeking particular advice, or like do you just kind of want reassurance?
Well, well, yeah, like, well, what I was like kind of saying was like, yeah, like I have kind of this one of the reasons why I'm like I was doubting was that I don't have a lot of I didn't have a lot of reason, and so like for me, and so and like and like a lot of them were kind of weak, like to me. So like but like when I really think about it, like for example, like faith was a big, and faith and personal experience is a really big thing, because like I've had a history of seizures and stuff like that, and like and I like and like I'm on the spectrum, and so like and like when I was born, like that like the doctors would told my parents that I wasn't gonna be as like capable as like or and stuff like that, and like and my mom would tell me like, oh hey, like God like made it where like we prayed and you and even the doctors were surprised and everything, and that you were that you exceeded their expectations and stuff, and a lot of times during my life, people have like doubted me and stuff, and so me being able to like graduate and stuff like that has really reinforced my belief in this thing, and that's been a big part of my life for that, and like a lot of people would tell me that.
Well, if I can, sorry, Erika, you go ahead.
It didn't matter. Mine's short and sweet. So I was going to say, I really like the phrase that, like, everything happens for a reason. I like that because, we as humans make them happen for a reason. Like when stuff happens to us and it turns out for the better, it's because we, with our tenacity, with our bravery, with our courage, we turn these situations that life tends to dish to us into something positive. We, make lemons out of lemonade. I understand that that's like a sickeningly optimistic perspective, but I mean, it sounds to me like you're just a strong person. You're a strong person who's taken the challenges that life has thrown at you and succeeded, nevertheless. That's how I'm hearing this.
Well, and I want to, if I can, I just want to reinforce, because this is a common, that's a pretty common thought process. Like, these things happen and, we pray to God and, we thank God that these things happen, or that these things, or whatever. You talked about a lot of accomplishments that you made personally. And I mean, that wasn't God or anything. Like, I understand that I'm talking to you as, you don't believe necessarily in God at this moment, but like, if I were in your shoes, I guess I would, think about those kinds of things, but then I would also think about, well, no, I'm the one that made the effort. Like, I'm the one that put in the effort to be able to do these things. Like, I didn't have like some kind of God to carry me through it or do anything, like that. Like any kind of accomplishment that you've had, I don't see like, God magically making it happen. Like you would expect God making something happen, like, that, like it just happens. It's never that way. It's always you put in the effort, you put in the time to make these things happen for yourself. And, I feel like reinforcing your confidence with the fact that, you are the one that is doing all of this stuff. And it's not because anybody has prayed to God or anything like that. It's because you have done, the work. Like you have put in all of the time and effort, kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I like that's a really good point. Yeah. And I mean, you can't. I can't really. A lot of times when I'm thinking about, like, for example, like the experiences with like seizures and stuff, like I think, well, one of the really interesting things when I was thinking about that, like on my journey, I was like, well, why would God like I'm talking about how God like possibly saved me from like dying or something like that from the seizures. Why do you let the seizures even happen?
Yeah, I mean that's a good way to contextualize it. Like, because a lot of people like to thank God for those kinds of things, or like natural disasters or anything that naturally happens. But I mean, I feel like ignoring the role that nature plays into it, or at least attributing nature to God baselessly, I think really kind of ignores the beauty and wonder and complexity of nature. And I mean, I don't know exactly what your experience has been dealing with the seizures and everything like that, but unless some holy man put his hand on your head and you immediately didn't have any seizures anymore, or any other kind of magical situation like that, I mean, I would definitely bank on some natural explanation, because we just, I mean, I don't think that we fully understand like the complexities of the human body and how things can operate and do operate. At least, like we can understand the basics of stuff, but I'm just saying that, like, a lot of people are amazed by any certain number of medical mysteries that happen or whatnot, but it's just the fact that, our bodies are crazy amazing at times, and sometimes it just happens naturally, and I think that that's a more likely situation than, like, a magical one.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, thank you for talking with me. I don't want to take up too much of y'all's time.
I do want to.
It's great that you reached out.
I totally agree. I'm so glad that you reached back out to us. I do want to emphasize, people in the chat were emphasizing this, but the Recovering from Religion Foundation, if you have if you're struggling with anything, like as far as what we've talked about here, they're a really good resource to use. I mean, you can either chat with them, either call in. I think they may have a chat feature possibly on the website, but they can also like connect you up with really good secular therapists or secular doctors in your area that can help you if you're really dealing with some stuff. So definitely Recovering from Religion. I believe it's recoveringfromreligion.org. Maybe I think it might be .org, not .com. But yeah, go to Recovering from.
Yeah, I've tried Recovering from Religion. Yeah, I've tried it a couple times. I'm like right now I was trying to find like a therapist, but and stuff like that. So
okay,
that's
yeah. Sometimes it can. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it can be tough. I know, speaking from somebody that lives in North Alabama, where like Christianity is just mixed in with like nearly everything around here, it can be incredibly tough.
Patrick, I wish you the absolute best. I hope that things like improve for you and that you continue on your journey. I truly, truly hope that you can start calling back if you feel the need to. And I hope that you continue to form this support system around you and, remember how far you've come. And yeah, thank you for calling.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. That was a wonderful call to end on, I think. I think it's probably super chat time, though, don't you?
It is definitely super chat time.
$4.99 from Cessna Pilot. Hi there, party people. Have a great show. I think we did.
Well, yeah. Well, except for that one part where I told a dude to turn his chair over and fuck himself with it. But,
No, I think that added to the experience, personally.
$4.99 from Megan Marie, who says, I recently found out that most of the great ape species are critically endangered, and that makes me really sad.
It should make you really sad, but you will be pleased to know that apes in general are incredibly resilient, and wonderful work at specific national parks, specifically in Indonesia and Malaysia for orangutans, and in many countries for gorillas and chimpanzees, and with the DRC for bonobos, have been ridiculously successful in helping great apes in their recovery. We got our fingers crossed.
That's awesome.
For $5 or $5 from the gray-haired gamer Erika, when did the great apes become tailless? Great apes have always been tailless. So Hominidae is characterized by a lack of tails, like all the way down. The tail loss occurred in the slightly a step up Hominoidea, so the apes generally. And it was probably, this is why gibbons don't have tails. either. And this, I can tell you definitively when it happened, because I did a video about this that you can find on my channel. It's called Why No Tail, or something along those lines. And effectively, it seems prior to the evolution of some of the first apes, the likes of Proconsul, Akimbo, and Merodopithecus, tails were already gone. So that suggests to us that they disappeared around 25, 26 million years ago in the likes of like Camelopardalis and things like that. And the cool part about that is we have found the specific gene that is responsible, the suite of genes that is responsible for taillessness in apes generally, because when you take the equivalent and mess around with it in mice, they're born tailless, which is really, really interesting and cool to see. We have a mechanism for it. We know how this actually happened. As for the pressure, I think it's pretty simple. You don't need a tail that's encumbering you, that's non-prehensile, when you can just invest in strong opposable thumbs and good grip strength, which is something that most monkeys don't have, but all apes do.
$4.99 from Scoop Magooter, who says, I knew you went to Hawaii with your Kona beer. Have you tried Shark's Cove in Hawaii? Great snorkeling. That sounds like a place I would not want to go, considering I had significant concerns about, like, you know, being taken by a shark and eaten in the middle of the Hawaiian waters. But there was actually a reef shark that apparently was swimming near us, which I'm glad I did not see. Yeah, after that, I was like so paranoid. I was sitting there waiting to be able to get on the boat, and I'm like looking around me like, where's the shark? Where's the shark? I don't. I'm not sure exactly where we snorkeled at. I don't think that it was Shark's Cove, because that sounds to me like I'd be like, no, can we find a different place?
Yeah. Kona beer, though, I'd like to note on that. Kona is my husband's favorite beer. We always have Kona in the fridge. It's numero. I didn't even know that was Kona, because ours always comes in bottles. I didn't even realize that was Kona Big Wave.
Well, yeah. So this was Kona. Oh, I have to drink the Kona Big Wave because it's a lighter beer, and with my diabetes, it helps. So, but yeah, my wife actually found these big ass 25-ounce cans, and I only drink them when I'm streaming, because I like how ridiculously big these cans are. So it looks ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, the viewers probably saw, but my husband came in and re-upped my White Claw halfway through. So, you know, that if I got incredibly jovial, that's probably why. $4.99 from Vandalia, 1998. Hey, Vandalia, how you doing? Erika, are you a doctor yet? Also, stop being on big time events when I'm at work. Andrew can't watch fully. Keep up the good work, you too, John. When am I a doctor? What a wonderful question. For those of you who don't follow my Twitter account or watch my YouTube videos, I'm officially ABD, so I'm all but dissertation. All I have to do now is take the next year to 3 years, depending on when I actually manage to get my NSF funded, go out, finish collecting all my data, and write a 200-page paper on it, and then defend it to people who know a lot more than me about the subject. Not at all scary, not at all daunting, should be a piece of cake.
Awesome. $5 from Swamp 10. I don't know if I pronounced that right. My friend believes that Native Americans are descendants of the biblical Israelites. What is the best way to challenge this? Sounds like a Mormon, to be honest. I know Mormonism teaches that particular thing. It can be rather complicated getting into all of that kind of historical detail. If you're really looking for a good resource on it, Naked Mormonism is a podcast that you should definitely check out. Bryce Blankenangel, I've had him on my show, and I believe he's been on this show, and I want to say that he was on Aron Ra's channel when they were looking at the Book of Mormon. But he's a great resource when you're looking for specific things like this. And I would probably go there for the best information. The best that I can do personally is just tell you that there's no reason to think that ancient Israelites traversed the Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, in order to get here. Like, I I don't know of any historical information that would actually confirm that, but more importantly, there seems to be no trace of any Israelite culture in North America as far as all of that goes. So I don't know what the specific arguments are that are used by Mormons and everything like that out there, but most likely it comes down to there's just simply no evidence to suggest that.
Yeah, I would add on to that the Thousand Genomes Project, like human phylogeny, human migration patterns as illustrated by phylogeny, absolutely nips that in the bud. There is zero support for groups of people who are recognized as being of Israelite descent, in Hebrew, whatever, coming to the United States and creating the Native Americans here. For all intents and purposes, our understanding of the population of the United States, North and South America, comes from probably Bering Strait land crossings of folks who have Asian ancestry, roughly, like 25,000 years ago, perhaps a bit earlier. I don't know my late, Pleistocene, Holocene, early Holocene stuff very well, but the genetics just annihilates that. I do know that. Okay, $5 from the Raven 200. I wish you all good days, good food, good sex, especially good health. Jimmy, go take a 3-page Ora Ora Barrage by Jotaro Kujo and Star Platinum. That is a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure reference. I'm sure Jimmy would appreciate that. And thank you for the donation.
$9.99 from Jamie Gallier, I believe maybe is how you pronounce that name. In honor of the patience the host showed. Not sure which caller. dab. There we go. I'll do a dab too. I feel like I'm too old for dabbing, but
it makes it funnier when you're too old for it. $50 from Godfried N. Good. Claim facial traits on Olmec heads prove African origin. If the Olmecs descended from African voyagers circa 1000 BCE, shouldn't there be DNA, anthropological, and archaeological evidence? Any other expected evidence? I don't believe they're African. I am not sure that has been the claim that is made for the Olmecs. My understanding is that the population, kind of what I said earlier, the population of North and South America can be traced pretty well to the Asian continent, coming across via the Bering Land Bridge. Although I will not put this into the ether. I will not be surprised if we find out that there's earlier population of North and South America via boats from the folks who are there in Asia and in Oceania, like moving from island to island in Indonesia, etc. Certainly they were capable of it. But I think the best support for this is the genomes, right? Like, unless someone is showing you a nice phylogeny of the Olmecs that's these guys nest with sub-Saharan Africa, which is incredibly distinct because sub-Saharan African people are way more genetically diverse than all of the rest of the world combined, because that's where we started, right? It's a founder effect, classic example. So that's what I would say about that. And thank you for your very large donation. Shoot me an email if you have further questions.
$5 from Aaron Reese. Yes, Erika, but when I played Army Men, I brought them all back to life afterward. Enough said.
I mean,
obviously.
You said it, not me, Aaron. $5 from Jason Jones. Erika, how does caffeine affect the systems of other monkeys and apes? Does it turbocharge them? Also, what's your favorite skull back there? Hi, John. Gosh, that's a tough one. My skulls are kind of rearranged right now because I'm doing a video on Neanderthals right now. So currently I have my chimp, my Leffersay, Neanderthal, and my Homo sapiens. My favorite skull is I have 3 favorites. My husband bought me a mandrill skull a while back, a male mandrill, and they've got these phenomenal canine teeth. Seriously, some of the best sexual selection that you see in primates. I love that one. I have a gibbon slightly above it. It's actually a Simang female. I really like it because the canines are also really big, and I study canines, and I think it's a cool example because gibbons, males and females, both have really huge canines, like the largest for their body size in the apes. Mandrills, it's like the total polar opposite. Males are 5 times the size of females generally and have these huge canine teeth. I just think it's a really cool comparison. And then my favorite hominin also has to do with the canines up. You can't see it, but it's Ardipithecus ramidus. I think it's great because they are hominins, right? Like they're ostensibly great apes, but they exhibit a Gibbon condition with reduced canines. For caffeine, it impacts other monkeys and apes identically to humans, right? But caffeine is not something that most other monkeys and apes, old world monkeys, I should say, so cercopithecoids and other hominoids actually have access to. But when they get it, they go nutso for it. And you can see case in point with how they behave with other addictive substances. They will preferentially eat fermented fruit because it makes them tipsy. And unfortunately, hilariously, but like in a sad way, historically, when apes have access to like cigarettes in like zoo settings, they become addicted to smoking and they're really good at doing it. So, so like us.
$5 from Alyshana Silverbow. I read somewhere that scientists got bored after watching the Earth turn for 24 hours, so they just called it a day.
Boo.
I love that joke.
I don't. $5 from Sapphic Bibliophile. Erika, I've heard you say most things we do, other apes do too, but we dial it up to 11. Do they do a sort of proto-art music in any way? Thanks to the both of you. I've always thought it's really weird that people don't look at the other apes and say, like, why don't they sing? Why don't they, make art, whatever? And I think the reason is because we see singing in a great many animals, including apes, specifically like the hylobatids, so gibbons and siamangs are wonderful singers. And in fact, they compose duets in their pair-bonded groups that they sing at the start of every day and can alter them and all those things. So if you consider singing art, then other apes do that in the form of them. And then also gorillas they hum to themselves while they're eating. It's like a contented humming. And it seems to have like a rhythm to it. So you could propose that. Chimpanzees will drum, things like that. So I would propose that with regard to music, yeah, you see the basics of this in other animals. As far as like written art, or like drawings and things like that, we don't see that in any other apes, like as far as like, drawing with a pen and pencil or like charcoal or anything like that. And I think the reason is pretty simple and twofold. One, they don't have the stuff to do it with. Hominins didn't do art despite having pretty big brain case sizes until we had access to things like ochre. And it mostly is like around the later end of genus Homo. But also, they don't have the motor skills to do that, right? Like, we have really fine motor skills, and that's what makes us the best throwers in the animal kingdom, right? Like, with darts and spears, whatever, we're really good at it. They don't have that so much. But I do point to an example that I really like. There was a chimpanzee, I think her name was Judy, in a troop of chimps, and what she started doing was arbitrarily one day, they noted that she would take this piece of grass, she would pull a piece of grass and stick it behind her ear, and just walk around with this piece of grass stuck behind her ear. No selective benefit to that. That is completely arbitrary, just a dumb thing that a chimp decided to do. Totally goofy. And then other chimps started doing it, right? And it diffused culturally through the group until like all the chimps, or at least a large portion of the chimps, were taking grass and like sticking them behind their ear. And to me, that sounds like the most basest form of like fashion or like altering your body for aesthetics that you can come up with. A lot of people respond to that and be like, well, it's just grass behind your ear. Like, what's the big deal? And I think the big deal is that they're doing it. And it seems to be a very basic, the most basic of all precursors that you could ever dream up for something like art and fashion and clothing and things like that.
I don't understand dismissing that for that reason, because people put flowers behind their ears. I do have one slightly, I guess, maybe inappropriate example for this particular comment. There was actually a study done where they introduced the concept of money to a group of monkeys, and they developed prostitution. So, it's more than, art and music. They also developed fucking for money. So, just another way. They're just like humans.
Oh, 100%. You literally pick anything, right?
Mm-hmm. Hey, honey, I mentioned your whole monkey prostitution thing.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. He's the one that found that.
I did a video on
You did do a video on our channel for that. $5 from the Raven 200. The fact JP started being a Richard when she heard John is a mythicist and completely tuned out everything he had to say is very telling. I mean, I feel like anybody that's going to get hung up on a really inconsequential statement that I made, that I felt like I only had to make it because people know me for that particular position I hold. I mean, I was just trying, like, I didn't want people to be like, oh, but he said Jesus was an itinerant prayer. Was he lying? Like, I just felt like a correct contextualization of what I was talking about was important, but apparently it destroyed the entire fucking conversation.
I just don't understand why it had to get nipped there. Like, I don't understand why she could sort of move around that, but I guess far be it from me. $9.99 from Logan Fisher. How to deal with being an atheist activist if your family's still uber religious? I want to have these convos with my family, but I also want to keep them close and have a good relationship. Tips. Oh man, that's a good question. I mean, my perspective on this is you're going to get the farthest by just asking inquisitive questions and starting conversations from that angle, rather than saying, like, coming at it gung-ho, like, here's your full position, here's where you stand. I think you spur a lot more thoughtful engagement when you're like, hey, what do you think about this? Or, hey, I read the other day XYZ, what are your thoughts on that? And then kind of go back and forth and push back, challenge, don't be a wet blanket. But people tend to put their guard down a lot more when it feels like a conversation that you're both engaging in, rather than an interrogation, which I think sometimes is a trap that a lot of us fall into.
Yeah, and I would just point people to channels like Anthony Magnabosco's channel, where he does a bunch of street epistemology, and he does exactly what Erika was talking about in that asking inquisitive questions and basically using the Socratic method in order to get somebody to reconsider, like, what they believe and why they believe it. And I've used it on a number of occasions when I've talked to Mormons. That's the reason why they came back like 3 times to my house. But asking those kind of questions and using the Socratic method, like the street epistemology uses, I think is the best way to have good, positive conversations. And I said this, I believe yesterday on the show, but they might respond. They might have an angry response, or like some kind of negative response to being asked certain questions, as long as you're not obviously trying to provoke them to have an angry response. Typically, the anger is a mask for other kind of emotions, and just keep that in mind. So, me saying that, I'm just trying to emphasize that you need to, don't respond with anger if they get angry. It's very important for you to, still try to connect with them, without responding in anger. I say that totally understanding that tonight I told a guy to turn his chair upside down and fuck his ass with it, right? Like, I understand that I don't know that guy. I wasn't trying to actually form a good relationship with that person. So that's the reason why it went that direction. If it was like my dad or something, I would have not told him to go fuck himself with the chair. Okay? I'm just saying, consider the audience that you want to reach.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to have patience with those around you than it is like with strangers. And I know, yeah, she kind of came after you there, John, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Hopefully that answered it. Okay, holy mackerel, 100 MX dollars from Michael Beverly. Hey, Erika, I got Michael Behe. Oh, wow. Coming on with me, moderating with Dr. J Bunny. Oh, Jay. Okay, good to hear Jay's still active. Got any good recommendations for material to get myself educated prior? You have any thoughts on irreducible complexity? Wow, yeah, thoughts on both. So first and foremost, if you want the background for this Behe conversation, what you need to do is go to my friend Dan Stern Cardinal's channel, Creation Myths. He's an evolutionary biologist. He's at Rutgers. He very specifically goes over the concept of irreducible complexity and has had that precise conversation with Michael Behe on his channel. So you should go check that out. It'll be a great starting point, and I think it's important because if you're having Behe on, I'll be interested to see if he's changed his position since he talked with Dan. Because my understanding is that he's well aware that the vast majority, and I'm only saying that to give myself wiggle room in case there's an exception here, of like non-evolvable structures have been shown to be evolvable, either in the sense of existing gradient precursors when you're talking about like the eye or the flagellum or whatever. To experimental work with things like the blood clotting cascade. So I believe it's the blood clotting cascade. So this is something that I think is not, you should definitely check out Dan's channel is what I'm saying. Now, with regard to my thoughts on irreducible complexity, it's an argument for incredulity, full stop. You could take irreducible complexity like ad infinitum or whatever and say, unless you can show me in real time the evolution of a single cellular organism post-abiogenesis to all modern biodiversity, I'm not going to believe it. And that's going to be the sticking point for the vast majority of people who use irreducible complexity as an argument. I've found that the best route to go with this is to say, okay, well, given the structure that you were talking about, do your research, find some examples of extant intermediates, and then simply ask the question, why couldn't it evolve? Right? We've seen irreducibly complex structures that were initially proposed to be irreducibly complex, shown to be evolvable pretty easily time and time again. What is the sticking point with the new example, whatever it may be, from the gears and the grasshopper legs to things like the flagellum, to the four-chambered heart, what have you? This is all boils down to, I can't conceive of how it may evolve, so therefore it mustn't have. So that would be my advice, is to research the given structure or system as much as you can, but ultimately point out it's an argument for incredulity that has not held up to scrutiny in the past.
I want to add for Michael, I would consume all irreducible complexity and Michael Behe content from like Jackson Wheat and Forrest Valkai. I don't know if Forrest has specific Behe content, but he definitely probably has irreducible complexity content on there, as well as, I don't know, Erika, do you cover irreducible complexity? I don't know if that's part of your wheelhouse. No. Okay.
No,
but okay. Yeah, I just know that when I was getting prepared for a number of things, like irreducible complexity, Jackson Wheat had some good videos on it, and I want to say that Forrest has some good videos on it. But Jackson, I know Jackson personally helped me with specific Behe arguments, and he helped me craft, because I actually did an in-person debate one time and against the creationists, and Jackson helped me prepare like my opening statements and get all of my ducks in a row for it. So he's a great resource as well, just in general for creationist kind of content.
Jackson's phenomenal. I'll tell you right now, Jay is not going to have a problem with irreducible complexity, though. Jay worked in the Lenski lab. I mean, he's going to be fine. And I bet you that they're specifically going to discuss the Lenski experiment, because I know Behe has talked in the past about how, the Lenski experiment isn't actually showing evolution in these bacteria. They are, and Jay knows because Jay worked in that lab under Lenski, so it's going to be fine. Okay.
1999 from Jay Sin, who says, fantastic show tonight. Erika and John are my new favorite Pride Month matchup. You two were amazing throughout. Tell that worthless yet incredibly handsome boss of yours to give you a raise. More of this, please.
Oh, I'll pass that along. Jimmy will love to hear that. I just checked the comments too. Someone mentioned Professor Dave. Professor Dave's got phenomenal content on Michael Behe as well. You should. I can't believe that slipped my mind, but yeah, it's pretty good stuff. $5 from Jeff Cochran. I gotta finish my PhD too, but when we're both done, want to start a modern Dover thrift edition-esque publishing house, pretty please. You know what? Yeah, sure, why not? let's assume that both our PhDs go swimmingly. I'm down for whatever. In that world, future Erika is down for anything.
$5 from Don't Spill. Erika, will you ever stream Ancestors, the Humankind Odyssey again and finish it? Love what you guys do.
You know, I love to hear people who bring up that my gamer era of content, because there was like a solid 2 or 3 month period where I did quite a few streams, and I streamed Ancestors, the Humankind Odyssey, which was a very fun, if very frustrating game about evolving. I did really enjoy it. The only reason I don't do that anymore is because I have no time. When I did those streams, it was I remember the house that my husband and I were renting at the time, and it was right before I started my PhD program, and I had this summer, and I had nothing but time. And of course, you know, my budding YouTube channel was small, so I had time to devote to that. I had time to do streaming, all sorts of stuff like that. I'd love to get back to it. The question is when. And I've got so many projects on the back burner. It's like I feel like I don't have enough time. There's just not enough hours in the day. But I'd love to someday.
I actually streamed the Ancestors, the Humankind Odyssey too. It was a fun game, although it took me. I feel like it took me way too long to figure out that I need to listen for certain audio clues in order to dodge the snakes before they bite me. Yeah. Like it took me way too long to learn that mechanic.
I couldn't evolve bipedalism for the life of me, and it turned out you needed to just wade all the time or carry so much stuff so that your hominin would figure out how to be bipedal. But I really liked the climbing mechanic in that game. It was really fun to rove around. I understand why they quit where they quit. Like I think you end at like Homo habilis or like approximately late Australopithecus, and like after that point, it's not as fun anyways. But I think it's really a fun game. I'm kind of shocked that they even made it. All right, $5 from Jessica Lynn. Happy Pride Month to all the LGBTQ plus community and allies. For all of you anti-LGBTQ plus folks, I hope you're having a really uncomfortable month. I'm on Twitter. They are. They're having a really bad month.
They have a bad June every June.
Every June. June is not good for their health. Shame that.
Yeah. $5 from Space Barbarian. I too am a godless engineer in North Alabama. See, now I wonder if I know who Space Barbarian is, but I just I don't know their online moniker. Because I have met a few people through my work. They're like, I've seen your videos. I think they're good. Like on the down low, they're like, I agree with you. And I'm like, great. I didn't expect coworkers to find that.
There is nothing on this planet more fun or more horrifying than like realizing that running into somebody like I last semester was the first semester that I had more than one student who recognized me, and it was mortifying and also very fun. So great and bad. All right, $10 from Million. I've heard the fossil fuel industry relies on evolution, but I can't find any information on how it's used to find deposits. Can you help me out, Erika? Yes, I can, X Million, because I have the sources for this. Go to my Gutsick Gibbon channel, go to my community notes tab or my community post tab, and scroll down to like maybe a year ago, maybe a little bit more than that. I have a list of quotes because I was responding to somebody who was a creationist and saying effectively the same thing, but not from an inquisitive point of view. And a geologist friend of mine gave me a wonderful series of quotes with the citations. Check it out. There's like 6 or 7 of them. It should be of great help to you. And if you can't find them, email me because I have them in a Google Doc. I don't know where in the Google Doc. And it's a very large doc. And I think the community notes thing would be easier. So check that out. If you can't find it, touch base and I'll get them to you.
$5 from Brian, who says, how did the Mind Electric become the title theme of Gutsick Gibbon?
I just really love the song. I'm a huge Callie Hall fan. I'm a huge Miracle Musical fan. And I was really, really into the song at the time, and I'm still really into the song, obviously. But I think Doctor, I Can't Tell If I'm Not Me is such a great line in a song to encompass what it's like studying human evolution, because you're studying all of these hominins who, for lack of a better term, are just indistinguishable in many ways from what it is that we've long considered unique to humans, to Homo sapiens rather. And so, you see that and you think to yourself, what is it that makes me me? What makes me special as a species? And the answer is not much, if anything. So that's why I like it. All right. 528 from Jesse Clark. I'm older than you, but I want to be you when I grow up. Lauren, New York, brilliant, love it. What a well-deserved compliment. That was an incredibly kind. You make me blush. All right,
awesome.
That's it. We're done, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Again, this is June 10th. This has been SkepTalk, and I want to tell you before we get going. I want to tell you a little bit about some of our upcoming shows. So I'm going to pull that up. I'm going to scroll to it because I don't have it memorized, because what a horrible, horrible critter I am. And I will tell you here momentarily if I can freaking find it. It is around here somewhere. If you find it first, John, you say it. You say it. Morgan, will you please direct message it to me? I'm so
Sorry, I thought it was in our chat, but I think I do have the line schedule. I got it in my recent. Yeah.
John, you got it. Tell us what's up next.
Right. Okay. So Tuesday, 6 p.m., we've got Chewed Gum. Arden and Alyssa are going to be hosting that. And then Wednesday, there's the Hang Up with Matt Dillahunty and Arden. And then Thursday at 2 p.m. Central, it's Takis with Alexander and Dr. Ben. And then on Sunday, we've got our normal 2 shows. The first Sunday shows with Jimmy and Erika. And then the After Dark was with Paulogia and an unknown co-host, to be determined. And then, of course, next Monday is Shannon Q with also a to be determined co-host. So we've got a lot of great stuff coming up this week.
We got great stuff coming up all the time. I love all the folks who work here at The Line. Everybody's chill and fun to be around. So make sure that you are present for all of those shows, lest you miss something important, something fun, and something interesting. And so, without further ado, my gentle and, of course, very modern apes, I really hope you enjoyed this episode of SkepTalk. Can't wait for the next one. And I want to thank you guys for being such curious primates, and we'll see you real soon next time.
Bye,
and
heathens.
We dance. We dance for the Get Out music if it ever starts. Oh, yeah. There it is.
Big shout out to Morgan for producing and Stephanie for the call screeners. Also, all of the mods that are in the chat helping, moderate. Thank you guys so much for making it a great place to comment and everything like that.